Chapter 1530. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Supplement. Although the power of the Calamity Sword was vast, and the heavy core could heal all injuries, it still couldn't be compared to the medicine of regret. However, after weighing both sides, Xiao Qinyu still felt that his side was at an advantage. As long as he could avoid becoming enemies with those three old bastards, this price was still worth it. And in fact, it was indeed so. After all, no one could guarantee that the two girls wouldn't be hurt at all. Chu Yang said seriously, "Senior, you must still remember the sudden appearance of the black fog a few days ago." Xiao Qinyu said, "So what if I remember?" Chu Yang took a deep breath and said, "Nothing much. It's just that the black fog had darkened the entire sky. I can conclude that it's a unique trace of the extraterrestrial demons' descent to the lower world. In other words, a great calamity is about to befall the Chongtian continent. This is an unavoidable world-ending calamity. I believe that even if we combine all our forces, we may not be able to avert the danger. That's all." "What are you saying? Nothing much? It's already the great calamity. And you're still saying that's all? You're really fucking calm." Hearing this, the experts of the big clans were a little conflicted. Xiao Qinyu frowned and muttered to himself, "Great calamity of the world? Extraterrestrial demons coming down?" As a peak-grade supreme martial artist, and the first clan master of the Xiao clan, Xiao Qinyu naturally knew that the so-called extraterrestrial demons were definitely not just a legend. Although he had never seen it before, it did exist. Chu Yang said, "That's right. This is the calamity of the entire heavenly realm. At such a critical moment, if we still fight for our own interests, I'm afraid we'll all be destroyed. That's our final outcome. That's why I'm willing to take the risk to show up in advance." Chu Yang said seriously, "I believe that Senior Xiao should be able to feel my sincerity. It's indeed very sincere. I can feel the sincerity of the Calamity Sword Master." Xiao Qinyu was also an old monster who had lived for tens of thousands of years. Naturally, he wasn't someone who didn't know the severity of the matter. Since Chu Yang had already made a gesture and fully expressed his sincerity, then Xiao Qinyu naturally had no reason to doubt the authenticity of this matter. Xiao Qinyu looked up at the sky. After a moment of silence, he said lightly, "I don't doubt the Calamity Sword Master's words. I also understand the harm that the extraterrestrial demons can cause." Chu Yang nodded. Xiao Qinyu took a few deep breaths. Suddenly, the expression in his eyes turned cold. He said with some pain, "But I can't join hands with you." Chu Yang was surprised. "Why?" The old man in front of him was absolutely not an impulsive person. With his experience, wisdom, and insight into the ways of the world, he shouldn't have thought that this was an excellent opportunity to protect the future of the Xiao clan. So how could he refuse it so decisively? Xiao Qinyu faced the sky and let out a long howl with complicated emotions. He said sternly, "Because of my younger brother. Because you are the master of Calamity Sword. Because of your destiny. Because we are natural enemies. They are natural enemies that cannot coexist." Xiao Qinyu's voice was solemn. "I don't doubt your intentions. I don't doubt it at all. I also admire your choice. I absolutely believe that you are making a sacrifice for the sake of the common people. You don't have any selfish motives. You are indeed worthy of being the master of Calamity Sword. But, I understand. If other people or other aristocratic families choose to cooperate with you in the end, I won't oppose or stop them. But I, Xiao Qinyu, will definitely fight you to the death." Xiao Qinyu looked up to the sky and let out a long howl. He sounded like he was crying and laughing at the same time. "I must avenge my younger brother. I must protect my clan from being destroyed by calamity. As for the common people of the world, what does it have to do with me whether they are destroyed or not?" Behind Xiao Qinyu, a few supreme martial artists lowered their heads and pondered. But most of the people started to clamor at once. "Old Xiao is right. Is this master of Calamity Sword out of his mind? He actually used such an excuse to deceive us." Yes. As long as the master of Calamity Sword and Calamity are killed one by one, the world will be peaceful. Extraterrestrial demons? What are those? Even if they really come, so what? Everyone will be drowned by their saliva. It's purely an alarmist talk. It's actually a disaster for the entire heavens? Earth-ending catastrophe? Haha. Can his words be more ridiculous? Energy would an energy. Anyone with a discerning eye can tell that this is just a stalling tactic by the Master of Calamity Sword. He wants us to cooperate with him, and then kill us all. Everyone, don't be fooled. What common people of the world? Earth-ending catastrophe? What does it matter if they are alive or dead? You actually used such a high-sounding excuse to deceive us. Master of Calamity Sword, your shamelessness is really without a limit. Everyone, don't be fooled by him. As long as we kill him, everything will be fine. Everyone started to clamor. Chu Yang kept a slight smile on his face, as if he didn't hear these insults at all. But the look in the depths of his eyes became colder and colder. Mo Tianji's face was also full of calmness. But that calmness was a little cruel. The rest of the Brothers of Calamity Sword were all furious. They tried their best to restrain themselves. Right now their boss was still talking, but it wasn't a good time to talk or fight. Everyone here is from the big dominating clans. You have ruled this continent for 10,000 years. Are the common people of this world so worthless and emotionless in your eyes? How can you be so disdainful? Mo Tianji's eyes flashed with an indescribable look. Yi Xiaoyao sneered. Value? Emotionality? What a joke! Haha, our big clans are all high and mighty. We look down on the world from the clouds. Can't we live without the common people in the world? He's just an ant. How can he be hurt? Mo Tianji said indifferently. If so, you still want to go against us like this? Fight on. Until we meet in life and death. Laughter came from the opposite side. Yes, it was indeed too ridiculous. Whether there were heavenly demons or not. What Mo Tianji, the brain of Calamity Sword, and Chu Yang, the master of Calamity Sword, did today was really a bit ridiculous. Boss, they have made their choice. What do you think? Mo Tianji turned around and asked Chu Yang. Chu Yang nodded deeply. Yes. If so, we will fight tomorrow morning. Mo Tianji's voice was cold. Everyone, since you don't want to control the future of this world, you can only leave everything to fate. The winner will be the king, and the loser will be the bandit. After this battle, it will be clear who is the winner and who is the loser. Boss, what you did today is simply. At night in the tent, GMO, who had been holding it in for a long time, finally couldn't help but start to talk nonsense. He had been holding it in for a long time. I also feel that it's a bit abrupt. Luo Kadi also didn't understand Chu Yang's actions. In fact, the others also felt the same way. But they knew that Chu Yang definitely had his reasons for doing so. So they all restrained themselves. Shut up for me. Mo Tianji roared. You two idiots. I really don't know what to say about you two. Do you not have brains, or do you have mold in your brains? Why are you so different from normal people? Mo Tianji had been having a hard time these few days. He had nowhere to vent his anger. GMO and Luo Kadi had become his punching bag. Gu Duxing seemed to have understood something. He said hesitantly, Could it be? Could it be what? Boss, you did this for our own good. Mo Tianji smiled confidently, including not letting Qinggu and Luer participate in the battle. That's also the reason. Qinggu and Luer will participate in the battle. Although the other party has many misgivings. Do you think we don't have any misgivings? Once you're in a killing frenzy on the battlefield, who cares about your background? Even if you're sure that they won't hurt Qinggu and Luer, would you feel good about relying on two little girls to restrain the enemy? Anyway, At this point, four pairs of eyes suddenly glared angrily at Mo Tianji. Mo Qinggu and Chu Luer opened their mouths and glared at him. What did you say? Who's a little girl? Do you think you're so great? Ah. Cough, cough, cough. Cough, cough. Mo Tianji was sweating profusely. He didn't dare to look at the two girls. These two little girls. Angering one of them was already enough for him. Angering two at the same time. Chu Yang coughed a few times and pulled the two girls into his arms. He said, Tianji doesn't mean any harm. Let him finish. Humph. The two girls pouted at the same time. Mo Tianji looked at Chu Yang with eyes full of jealousy and gratitude. Then he continued. Actually, the reason why Big Brother wants to do this today is because he sincerely wants to join forces with them to fight against the extraterrestrial demons. However, we also know that it's impossible to succeed. Yet we still want to give it a try. If the clans can let down their guard and put the common people's lives first, it'll naturally be the best. However, we all know that the chances of them accepting this are too slim. Since you know that the chances are slim, why do you want to make a futile attempt? Rui Butong asked curiously. Idiot. Mo Tianji's lecturing aura had already been suppressed by Mo Qinggu and Chu Luer. However, Rui Budong's question brought out his emotions again. Instantly, his aura soared, and he was insufferably arrogant. GMO and Luo Kadi looked at Rui Butong with grievance. They wished they could beat this guy up. Can't you just let him finish his nagging? How much more scolding would we have to endure with this one sentence of yours? That's because the final battle is about to begin. We will participate in it from beginning to end. After this battle, we won't have any free time. We will definitely kill our way through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Mo Tianji yelled angrily. How many people will we kill along the way? How many people are there in the big clans? Are these people innocent? Are there any wrongdoings? Can you all live with it? If we continue to kill blindly, how many inner demons will we add in the end? How big of an impact will this have on our future path? Have you thought about it? But now Big Brother is standing on the side of righteousness. If they don't agree, it's because they are crazy. It's because they don't see the big picture. It's because of their selfishness that they see all living beings as ants and have abandoned the common people. On this basis, if they still want to make things difficult for us in a life and death battle, even if we kill them all, what impact will it have on our state of mind? It will instead become a kind of merit. Chapter 1531. Do you understand? Mo Tianji roared. We understand, we really understand. GMO hurriedly wiped the spittle on his face. He was very sad, very depressed and very aggrieved. He was even more aggrieved than he was during the day. For tomorrow's decisive battle, we will have to rely on Commander-in-Chief Diwu. Xiao Chunyu still had some embarrassment on his face. Diwu Qingro nodded slightly and said, Qingro will try his best to deal with them. Today's matter happened a little suddenly. The whole thing was an accident. Xiao Chunyu said, Please don't blame me, Commander-in-Chief Diwu. Regarding today's matter, Xiao Chunyu was indeed a little embarrassed. After all, he and the others ignored the battle situation and chased after the treasure. It could be said that he left Diwu Qingro with a mess that was almost impossible to clean up. However, Diwu Qingro managed to persevere in this mess. He even persevered until Xiao Chun and the others came back. However, Xiao Chun and the others still ignored the danger in front of them and blindly chased after the treasure, causing the battle situation to be completely out of control. The fact that they were not defeated because of this was already a great contribution by Diwu Qingro. The clans were already very grateful. If that was really the case, the allied forces besieging the Li clan would be defeated by the enemy before the decisive battle. That would really be a joke for eternity. As for Xiao Chun himself, he would definitely become the biggest joke and leave his name in history. But understanding was one thing. If this happened again, Xiao Chunyu really couldn't be sure that he wouldn't chase after them again. Everyone could talk about the principle, but how many people could really do it? Diwu Qingro nodded to show that he understood and said, It's okay. Qingro can understand the choice of the elders. That is a great temptation for us martial artists. It's really hard to resist that temptation. Xiao Chunyu saw that Diwu Qingro spoke from the bottom of his heart, and also praised him in his heart. After encountering such a thing, he could still accept it without changing his expression, and be so calm. Throughout his 10,000 years of life, he really had never seen someone like him. Diwu Qingro smiled faintly, and lowered his head respectfully. He thought to himself, You guys from the big clans are like this. Even if I blame you, what can I do to you? At the end of the day, you're just looking for trouble for yourselves. You guys are nothing more than my tools. I'm using you guys to fight Mo Tianji, so that I can live up to my expectations. That's all. It's just that I'm unlucky and have no choice but to choose you. But since he had already made his choice, he had to bear the consequences. Regardless of whether you obey my orders in the future or not, I will fight this battle to the end. Since that's the case, why should I be angry? Was he really asking for it? The next morning, the morning sun had not yet fully risen, and the curtains of the great battle had already been drawn with a miserable cry. The ambush that Motianji had set up had finally begun to take action. The first person to make a move was none other than Li Ju. This layer of snow didn't look any different from the other layers of snow, but the difference was like heaven and earth. This was a layer of snow formed after the previous landslide. Because countless boulders had rolled down with the landslide, this area was densely covered in snow. Without a doubt, it formed a natural cover. Because of the effect of the three-light array, as long as a rock came into contact with the mountain, it would immediately become an inseparable part of the mountain under the influence of the array. It could be said to be a natural cover. Before the great battle had even begun, Motianji had already made a lot of preparations on the surface. He had also informed the Li clan of this early on. After the 4 teams of the Li clan entered the layer of snow, they, who were familiar with the terrain, naturally went into hiding and quietly waited for the right moment to deliver the fatal blow. Under the layer of snow, there was a cave that had been dug in advance. Once the three-light array was formed, the cave became an indestructible base. As for the Li clan members, after they entered the underground, they immediately found a large boulder that had rolled down from the mountain and pressed the boulder down. In front of such an expert, the accumulated snow along the way was completely unable to stop them as they reached the underground. This was equivalent to using the connection between the boulders to fix this layer of snow here. Some of the boulders that were useful for ambushes stopped when they were just a little bit away from the ground. Then they went into the cave. The boulders hung in the air, just a few feet away from touching the ground. This formed an exceptionally hidden cover. If they encountered any danger, they just had to drag the boulders down and touch the ground. Therefore, the boulders that could be crushed with a pinch a moment ago had now become something that even deities would find hard to destroy. Motianji had made all these arrangements in advance. It could be said that he had already made the best use of the terrain here. As long as all the experts of the Li clan operated like this, it would not be too rare for them to win against the many and defeat the strong with the weak. Not to mention the other layers of backup plans. The experts of the allied forces naturally did not know that the experts of the Li clan were all in hiding. It was even more impossible for them to know the secret under this layer of snow. Previously, there was once a supreme martial artist who tried to lift up the entire layer of snow with both hands. But they did not expect that the cultivation that could move mountains and fill seas would be completely useless in this layer of snow. This discovery caused the experts of the Alliance army to feel anxious, as if they were treading on thin ice. They could only obey the order and slowly advance under this layer of snow, hiding quietly. Over the course of a day and a night, countless experts of the coalition army had been wandering around every hole where the Li family was hiding. But the Li clan members did not move at all. They were only waiting for Motianji's order to attack and give the enemy a heavy blow. However, this attack, which should have been the most effective, was ruined by their own people. Just like how Xiao Chunyu and the others ignored the big picture and went out of control because of the temptation of external benefits, this time, it was the Li clan's turn to spoil the whole pot of porridge. The heavens did not completely care for Brother Jia. At least, they did not really care for the Li clan. Li Ju finally could not bear it anymore. This kind of natural disgust and jealousy towards people who were better than him made this arrogant Li clan Grand Duke much less patient than others. When he saw the 2 experts of the allied forces go past the hole he was hiding in, Li Ju's desire to perform suddenly became uncontrollable and unstoppable. The enemies in front of him were completely unprepared. One strike was enough to kill them. Why did he have to wait so rigidly for Motianji's order? Could it be that his eyes were able to see what was going on underground from above? Was he so powerful? Thus, Li Ju silently slipped out of his hiding place. The 2 short swords in his hands silently cut off the necks of the 2 men from behind. This wonderful taste of a fatal attack was simply too good. 2 experts who weren't any weaker than him had silently lost their lives under his sneak attack. Li Ju almost looked up to the sky and let out a long howl. But then, a buzzing sound was heard, as if someone was crying and complaining. Li Ju's face instantly turned pale. The two dead supreme martial artists had made a strange sound. As a direct descendant of a big clan, how could Li Ju not know this sound? That was supreme martial artist death. The so-called supreme martial artist death was made of a special heavenly sound metal. When worn, as long as one's body still had breath of life, even if it was only a little bit, it would still not make a sound. But once a person died, his breath of life would naturally disappear. Then this supreme martial artist death would make a strange sound similar to crying. Normally, the big clans would wear it on their important people. But no one thought that Wuxia Rou would equip these people with such important things. In fact, one only needed to think about it to understand that Wuxia Rou would not equip them under the dark layer of snow. The lower the level of a martial artist, the easier it was to be killed. But once killed, the enemy's hiding place would be exposed. Especially in such a situation where the enemy was in the open, and they were in the dark. It was reasonable to equip them with such things. Whoosh! A sound was heard from afar. Then the pressure of the snow suddenly increased. Li Ju carefully retreated to his hiding place. The target is over there. A voice was heard. It had already discovered this place. Voices were also heard from the opposite side. It was too late to return to the cave. Li Ju panicked. He turned around and ran to one side. His family members were hiding there. He would be much safer with the experts of his clan. Everyone go and catch the one who is running away. An angry voice was heard. He is the murderer. Lu Laosan and Ma Jun are finished. With a swoosh, several people rushed over and struck out with their palms in the air. Even though they were underground, there was a clear sound of air exploding. Wherever it passed, the snow melted rapidly. Li Ju had grown up in the northwest. It could be said that he had been dealing with ice and snow all year round. Naturally, he knew all kinds of changes under the snow like the back of his hand. How to move under the snow at high speed was his specialty. Of course, he was not the only one. Every member of the Li clan was like this. Compared to the allied forces, he was like a fish in water. Even though his strength was weak, he had an absolute advantage in speed. This had undoubtedly become his strongest means to deal with the enemy. He suddenly turned around and glided in the snow. In a flash, he had already arrived behind a fixed big rock. Then, his whole body disappeared as if he had disappeared into thin air. The powerful and domineering Supreme Chi hit the big rock with a boom and made an explosive sound, but it didn't even shake off the rock. The three-light array could turn a rock into an immortal. Its overbearing power was evident. Idiot! Don't hit the rock. It's useless. Hit it. A Supreme Master said angrily. Chapter 1532. Li Ju was lucky to escape, but unexpectedly, another person flew over from the other side. Coincidentally, just before Li Ju was about to flash into another cave, he stopped him. Li Ju was shocked. He turned around and ran. However, the force he exerted earlier had completely exposed the cave. In fact, in the current situation, if Li Ju didn't panic, he could definitely protect the hidden cave. Although there was a certain risk, with Li Ju's movement advantage in the snow, he might be able to escape unscathed. However, he panicked and didn't know where to go. Naturally, he exposed everything that could be exposed and couldn't be exposed. As the saying goes, one man rises and one man destroys a country. That was it. There's a cave here. How sharp was a supreme martial artist's vision? Especially in this kind of situation. He was naturally on high alert, extremely careful, and extremely cautious. He had already discovered something fishy. He shouted, "There must be enemies inside. Everyone come quickly. Trap them. Chase that little one. Don't kill him with one blow. Force him to reveal the location of the ambush." Another supreme martial artist immediately realized. This must be the Li clan's secret ambush. Everyone pay attention. As long as you find a place similar to a cave, seal it immediately. Once you confirm that it's the enemy's nest, gather your strength and kill the people inside. Let's close the door and beat the dog. Don't give them a chance to escape. Ambush. Let's bury ourselves in the gates of hell. Yes. Li Ju ran for his life in panic. At this moment, He really regretted it. Wouldn't it be better if he just stayed there obediently? Why did he have to show off? Now it's over. He didn't make any contributions. Instead, he exposed the Li clan's ambush. At this moment, there were countless supreme martial artists of the allied army, surrounding him from 3 directions behind him. If Li Ju didn't want to die now, he had to escape. When people were in danger, they often panicked and didn't know where to go. They would only choose the path they were most familiar with to escape. This was human instinct. As long as they were normal people, they would be controlled by this instinct. This was especially true for those who were selfish and self-centered. This instinct was even more obvious. And Li Ju, without a doubt, was definitely a selfish person. Even if it was just to live a little longer, he could sacrifice anyone in exchange for a chance to live. This was Li Ju. Therefore, the Alliance army's wish was successfully achieved. As he fled, more and more of the Li family's ambush locations were exposed. The Alliance army already had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers, and because of the geographical advantage, it was a situation of closing the door and beating the dog. How could he not destroy them one by one at a time? The most tragic thing was that the originally indestructible environment formed by the 3 lights' Great Formation had instead become the sturdiest cage at this moment. As long as a situation was formed, the Li clan wouldn't even have the chance to retaliate and would be directly killed by the combined palm force of a large number of supreme martial artists. In the end, the situation became worse and worse. The Li clan's men had no choice but to come out of the cave and participate in the battle, because they would be exposed sooner or later. If he stayed inside, he would only be waiting for death. He might as well take the initiative to show himself and fight to the death. As long as they heard that Li Ju was being chased and approached, they could only come out and fight. Otherwise, they could only wait for death. The battle of annihilation and counter-annihilation under the snow. After a day and night of silence, it had actually played out in such a tragic, comical, and even helpless manner. With such a grandson, if the Li family could survive, that would be a truly rare thing. Mo Tianji had racked his brains and used all his means to set up a seamless ambush. The excellent terrain that he had painstakingly created had completely collapsed just because of such a person. It was not only the allied forces that had pig-like teammates. The Li clan also had them. Even if there was only one of them, it was enough to cause the perfect plan to collapse. The ghost calculator's wheel, because of this piece of trash, had completely collapsed. There were constantly Li clan members who were closed and beaten, or who took the initiative to show themselves fight and die. There were also constant cheers from the Alliance army. If Li Ju could restrain himself and not move, when the final battle started, this hidden chess piece would definitely be an extremely powerful force that could play an unimaginably powerful role. Because it was impossible for the Alliance army to discover them at all. With one in the light and one in the dark, the advantage was undoubtedly overwhelming. But now, at this moment, everything had gone down the drain. The more Li Ju fled, the more chaotic he became. In the end, his mind was completely scattered, and he was simply fleeing based on his instincts. He had no sense of direction at all. The few supreme martial artists who had been chasing behind the Alliance army could have taken him down long ago, but they didn't. They only occasionally interfered with him, using the threat of their lives to force him to create greater results. When many Li clan members who were forced to come out and fight saw such a situation, they all sighed miserably. All along, as the number 1 person of this generation of the Li clan, and the young master of the clan, Li Ju could be said to be dignified and elegant. No matter what he did, he always looked like he had a card up his sleeve, strategizing and strategizing. But who would have thought that this young master of the clan, who had once been entrusted with high hopes by the clan, who was almost confirmed to be the first successor, would actually be so unbearable in the face of such a life-and-death crisis? Not only did he have no determination and no plan, he even implicated others, his compatriots, and the entire Li clan. It was really better for him to die. It wasn't that no one from the Li clan wanted to kill Li Ju right away, but Li Ju was very popular now. The Alliance army even specially sent several top experts to surround Li Ju at a place slightly further away from him. As long as someone from the Li clan approached, they would immediately kill him. So far, at least 3 to 4 waves of Li clan members who wanted to kill Li Ju and cut off all future troubles were ambushed. In an extremely short period of time, there were already more than 200 Li clan members who were forced to come out and fight. This was already the strength of 2 small teams. According to Mo Tianji's plan, these people had to destroy at least 400 people of the Alliance army before it would be their turn to be annihilated. But now, they were already facing total annihilation without getting anything out of it at all. Almost half of them were directly killed by the Alliance army and sacrificed, without any value. Is the Li clan really doomed? A supreme martial artist of the Li clan wanted to kill Li Ju, but was attacked by several people instead. He howled sorrowfully at the sky, blood spurting from his mouth as he fell to the ground and died with hatred in his heart. The Li clan really was doomed, not for other reasons, but even if the Li clan hadn't encountered such a crisis of annihilation, as long as the clan's business was passed to Li Ju's hands, by the time he had power in his hands, and looking at their current performance, the annihilation of the Li clan was definitely inevitable. Informed the higher-ups immediately, Li Tongtian dealt with the attacks of the few supreme martial artists of the Alliance army in a flurry. Blood spurted from his mouth, and his eyes were wide open. Hurry! If the higher-ups don't know about the changes below, and continue to act according to the original plan, something big is going to happen. It's no longer necessary. Li Tongtian's fierce roar was like a heart-wrenching cry of blood. Kill them at full speed. A high-level supreme martial artist of the Alliance army gave the order at the same time. We must not let anyone from the Li clan rush to the snow surface. Victory now is equivalent to laying the foundation for the final battle in the future. Let's work together and accomplish this. All the Alliance armies started to risk their lives at the same time, increasing the pressure even more. This place was 10,000 feet below the snow layer. If a supreme martial artist's voice could travel 100 miles in a spacious place, then in such an environment, it couldn't even travel a distance of 5 miles. Even supreme martial artists were no exception. The 10,000 feet of snow layer was a natural obstacle in the first place, be it to light, sound, or power. Everyone from the Li clan tried their best to break out of the encirclement with bloodshot eyes, trying their best to rush to the surface. However, in the face of the opponent's tide-like attacks, not a single one of them was able to successfully break out of the encirclement. There were even some who risked their lives and exchanged injuries for injuries. They rushed up 1,000 feet without a care for anything else, only to have their legs chopped off by the people below instead. If they wanted to rush up, they would have to pay a high price. This price had already exceeded the limits of what the Li clan could afford. There was nothing they could do. This was especially so under this layer of snow, where one couldn't see anything. An absolute geographical advantage could also become the most fatal obstacle. This was exactly the case right now, and all these losses that could have been completely avoided just because of one person's stupidity had now become completely unavoidable. The enemy only needed to leave a portion of their men to guard high up in the sky. Then, the moment they rushed up without a care for anything else, they would have already been chopped into 2. Even if it wasn't as easy as flipping one's hand, it wasn't much harder than drinking plain water. Why? Why? My Li clan! My Li clan! My clan! Li Tongtian roared into the sky, his eyes filled with blood and tears. Blood and pieces of his internal organs spurted out together with his voice. A bright blade suddenly slashed across. Li Tongtian's head flew up from the snow layer, but he still shouted his last sentence at the top of his voice. My clan! Kill! Such a heaven-sent opportunity is hard to come by. It can be seen that the destruction of the Li clan is the will of the heavens. Even a tribulation can't reverse it. A supreme martial artist of the Yi clan shouted crazily, Everyone, attack with all your might and kill all these people. The world below the layer of snow is ours. Once the battle breaks out above, this place will become a paradise for our ambush. A place of victory. Li Ju fled for his life in a panic. At this moment, he was so flustered that he even forgot about the heart of different bodies that his father, Li Wubua, had set up for him. His mind was filled with only escape, escape, escape. What he didn't know was that the Allied forces wouldn't kill him at all. They would even try their best to protect him and expose more of the Li clan's ambush points. The ones who were really desperate to get rid of him were the people from the Li clan. Everyone in the Li clan. This included his father, the person who had originally loved and valued him the most. Li Wubua, who had been silently observing and listening to everything in a hidden cave all this while, sighed. His own son was actually so useless. With such a temperament, how could he be qualified to become one of the tribulations? His thoughts back then were really extremely laughable. The previous chapter was uploaded before 8 o'clock, and I forgot to publish it. I thought that it had already been published, so I hurriedly wrote this chapter. In the end, I only realized that the previous chapter was still there when I uploaded this chapter. What the fuck, please forgive me. Chapter 1533. Li Wubua let out a tragic laugh. He paid close attention to all the movements outside. When he noticed that the sounds of the pursuit were gradually getting further and further away, he abruptly dashed out. He chose not to participate in any battle, nor did he care about his treasures. Instead, he climbed upwards like a swimming fish. Li Wubua's action was not to escape like Li Ju, but to deliver a message. The huge change in the snow had to be notified to the higher-ups as soon as possible. Otherwise, not only would the sacrifice of this batch of Li clan members be in vain, it would also seriously affect the future arrangements. It might even lock them into a dead end with no room for maneuver. There was no doubt that Li Wubua's heart was filled with resentment, viciousness, and schemes. But at this moment, the decision made by the current clan leader of the Li clan was still for the clan. Because they were from the Li clan. As a father and a younger brother of the Li clan, he had to make up for his son's loss. Li Wubua's body slid upwards stealthily. His speed was relatively not fast. He was completely indifferent to everything else. In fact, not far away, there were 2 Li clan members who were currently being besieged. With his strength, he could definitely rescue them easily. Yet, he completely ignored them. He only made use of whatever concealment he could find to break through upwards. Li Wubua had his own plans for what was more important. In the blink of an eye, he had already climbed up more than 2,000 feet. Over there, someone is going up there. A supreme martial artist from the Allied forces, who was in the middle of a battle, heard that there seemed to be movement behind him. Out of caution, he casually sliced through the snow with his saber and attacked the source of the movement, Li Wubua. Li Wubua blocked it with his sword. With a clang, he borrowed the momentum of the saber and flew upwards at full speed. Previously, he did not dare to make too much of a commotion and could only go up slowly. Now that his whereabouts were exposed, he might as well go up at full speed and try his best to break through the snow. As long as he could reach the top, or even if he could just let out a shout, it might bring about a chance of turning the situation around. This shout, which was filled with vigilance, immediately attracted countless experts from the Allied forces from all directions. There were even some who started to charge upwards without regard for anything. There was no lack of high-level supreme martial artists among them. Once the Li clan members rushed out and let the higher-ups know about the change below, it would not be a complete victory. At least, they would not be able to achieve the stunning effect of a surprise attack. Mo Tianji, the strategist of this calamity, would certainly make a corresponding strategic change. At that time, it would be another matter if they still wanted to take advantage of him. On the other hand, Li Wubua didn't entangle himself with any enemy at all. He didn't even respond to any of his opponent's attacks. No matter what kind of attack it was, he just blindly borrowed it as an upward force. However, the price he had to pay for this was extremely tragic. In the blink of an eye, his body was already dripping with blood and flesh. His external injuries were so heavy that one could imagine his internal injuries. One must know that the attacks that came from all directions were mainly palm chi and fist chi. However, he still stubbornly charged upwards. At this moment, his speed of ascension had already reached its peak. There was still a space of 300 feet above the snow layer here. Li Wubua's countenance was mournful. At this moment, he unleashed the last of his remaining energy and charged upwards rapidly. This charge seemed to have gathered all of his strength. His entire body flew upwards like a cannonball. A saber flew towards him at lightning speed. Its target was originally his neck, but Li Wubua's upper body had already charged over in an instant. In that instant, Li Wubua only felt a chill in his knees, and his body inexplicably lightened. Half of his body finally succeeded in charging out of the snow layer. Li Wubua's 2 legs rushed out like a waterfall of blood. It looked as if he was using his blood as the momentum to push himself up. Just as he breathed in the air outside, Li Wubua already couldn't wait to yell at the sky. The ambush below has been broken. Our side has suffered a crushing defeat. The ambush below has been broken. He had no choice but to do so, because Li Wubua wasn't sure how long more he could live. Perhaps in the next instant, his soul would have already left his body. However, the news must be sent out. It must be sent out. It must be sent out at the first instant. In the quiet snowy plains, his furious roar reverberated far and wide, reverberating in all directions. The surrounding snow layer cracked open. A few supreme martial artists from the allied forces also jumped out. Sabers and swords were drawn, slashing down on his body like snowflakes. Every move was fatal and fatal. Li Wubua didn't dodge at all. It wasn't because his legs were crippled, nor was it because he didn't have the strength to struggle. Instead, it was because he was afraid that once he resisted or dodged, he would exhaust his remaining strength. It would be a real disaster if his family couldn't hear him. At this moment, as long as his family could hear him, what was this crippled life of his worth? In the forest of sabers and rain of swords that were filled with despair and killing, blood splattered everywhere. Li Wubua looked up at the sky and cried out the last words of his life. The ambush below has been broken. Emo Tianji, did you hear that? Elder Master. Unfortunately, before he could finish his words and before Yu'in could reply, Li Wubua's body turned into a pile of minced meat amidst a series of puffing sounds. A supreme martial artist from the allied forces was filled with hatred. He raised his leg and kicked his only intact head, sending it flying into the air and landing thousands of feet away. Li Wubua had been scheming and scheming all his life. He had been shameless and despicable all his life. However, at his last moment, he was... How could one judge the merits and demerits of a person's life? No matter what, it was really impossible to make a final conclusion. At this moment, Chu Yang and the others had already returned to their respective ambush spots. Emo Tianji was discussing some details with Li Chuanbua. Everything had already been planned and discussed. They were only waiting for the final battle to begin. The so-called discussion now was just to strive for perfection. No matter what was discussed, it wouldn't have much of an impact on the final outcome. However, at this moment a heart-wrenching scream suddenly rang out. Although the volume wasn't loud, it could still be heard clearly. There was an indescribable sense of grief, helplessness, as well as a sense of regret that almost caused one's internal organs to rupture and vomit blood. All these emotions were so clear that everyone could empathize with him. The ambush below has been broken. We have suffered a crushing defeat. Emo Tianji, did you hear that? It's Li Wubua. It's actually him? How can it be? Li Xiangxi stood up at once. The ambush below the layer of snow has been broken? How is that possible? Li Chuanbua raised his head in disbelief. Such a tight ambush can be said to be the work of the gods. It's flawless. How can it be broken before the final battle has even begun? This is impossible. Something's not right. Let's go and take a look. Emo Tianji was also somewhat baffled. Several people rushed out as though they were flying. A moment later, they came to the layer of snow. A lone human head was seen facing the sky. It was Li Wubua. His face was filled with grief and indignation. His eyes were still wide open. He had actually died with his eyes wide open. Looks like the ambush below has really been broken. This is really unexpected. Emo Tianji sighed. Li Wubua went down with the last wave of the second team. His hiding spot can be said to be extremely well hidden. Also, with Li Wubua's character, unless he's at the end of his rope, I'm afraid he won't. Li Chuanbua's expression was sinister, as though a storm was brewing. He bellowed furiously. I'm just curious about one thing. The ambush here can be said to be flawless. With so many resources used and the geographical advantage, it's not an exaggeration to say that we have all the advantages. How can it be broken just like that? Mo Tianji was silent for a moment. Then he said, if there's no internal chaos, there's definitely no reason for it to be broken. That's the only possibility. Li Chuanbuo's beard flared up. He bellowed furiously. Who would dare to leak such a big clan matter? Who would leak it? I don't believe that there would be such a traitor in the Li clan. I'll go down and take a look. Mo Tianji and the rest couldn't stop him in time. Li Chuanbuo bellowed furiously and quickly sank into the layer of snow. A low-grade supreme martial artist sank into the layer of snow. Just the protective aura around him was enough to ward off all evil. Withstanding a series of attacks, he went all the way down just like that. He happened to see a Li clan expert being besieged. The situation was already precarious. Li Chuanbuo bellowed furiously and struck out with his palms. With two loud bangs, two experts from the allied forces had their bones and tendons broken. They flew out from both sides, spurting out blood. Then furious roars rang out from all directions. Countless experts from the allied forces swarmed over. Li Chuanbuo lifted that Li clan expert with one hand. His left hand quickly drew a circle. A strong gust of wind blew out, blocking everyone dozens of feet away. Then, he dashed out as though he was flying. Even though Li Chuanbuo was a top-grade expert, he couldn't take on so many people head-on by himself. The next moment, with a thud, Li Chuanbuo flew out of the layer of snow again. Standing on it, he placed the person he had saved in front of him and stuffed a pill into his mouth. However, this person was already at the end of his life. He was on his last breath. With the help of the pill, he regained his vitality and mumbled, Old master. Li Chuanbuo's eyes darkened. He knew that he couldn't be saved. He asked evenly, tell me, how did the ambush break? Hearing that, the person's eyes suddenly revealed an intense fury that couldn't be vented. He wanted to speak, but due to the excessive emotional shock, he started coughing violently. Li Xiangxi hurriedly pressed his hand against his back and slowly channeled his internal energy. However, he shook his head. He could clearly feel that the person's vitality was gradually dissipating. Such injuries were really hard to heal. It's Li Ju. That damned bastard. That person was filled with intense hatred, gnashing his teeth as though he wanted to skin Li Ju alive. Originally, everything was fine. We had been waiting for the arrival of the final battle. It was that bastard Li Ju, who jumped out on his own without rhyme or reason. He was pursued by the enemy, but in a panic, he didn't know where to go and led us to every place where we were lying in ambush. In the end, all of us were exposed. Many of our brothers were blocked in their caves and beaten to death. This person was seriously injured. Originally, he was already on the verge of death. However, when he talked about this, the intense hatred in his heart actually made him speak more fluently. We had no choice but to come out and fight, intending to fight to the death. However, we had already completely lost the geographical advantage. The enemy outnumbered us. We were no match for them at all. The eyes of this Li clan expert were turning white, his throat gurgling. Finally he roared, Li Ju, even if I die, I won't let you off. Chapter 1534. Li Xiangxi lowered his head sadly. Li Chuanbuo was trembling all over. Even his beard was trembling. Suddenly he roared, Li Ju. His voice was like thunder. At this moment, Li Chuanbuo was obviously extremely angry. Mo Tianji frowned. He also felt that this turn of events was a little too troublesome. He had spent so much effort to set up such a flawless plan. But it was actually destroyed so cleanly by an idiot. This was really a change that no one could have expected. There's no other way. We have to change the original plan. Mo Tianji let out a long sigh. He didn't expect that after Diwu Qingrou's side had an internal conflict, the same situation would happen before he could finish gloating over it. Was this really Heaven's will playing tricks on them? I'll go down again. Look at the situation, and see if I can save a few people. Li Chuanbuo frowned. In Li Chuanbuo's opinion, the current situation was so bad that they had to think of ways to remedy it. If they could save the remaining Li clan brothers, they would at least be able to preserve some fighting power. Most importantly, the old man really couldn't bear to let his descendants sacrifice themselves in vain. No. You definitely can't go down anymore. Emotianji hurriedly stopped him. Just now, I didn't stop Elder Li from entering the danger zone, because the situation was unclear, and I needed to understand the current situation. Now that the situation is clear, it can be said that it's chaos down there. Unknown dangers may occur at any time, especially since there's no way to see anything down there. Even if you force yourself to go down, it'll be useless. It's not worth it. I'll pay attention to some dangers, but can I always watch them all get killed? If I can preserve a bit of fighting power, I'll have a bit more chance of survival. Li Chuanbo was obviously very anxious. It was rare for him to doubt Emotianji's decision. Elderly, I know that you're anxious, but if you go out again, the Allied forces will definitely not sit by and watch. Xiao Qinyu will definitely follow closely behind with his men. If you're trapped here too, there's no need to fight the rest of the battle. Now that things have come to this, saving people is definitely not the best plan. We can only activate the follow-up change of the 3-light array in advance, the sunlight array. Emotianji sighed. Activate the sunlight array in advance? Yes, this is the only way to break the current situation. But this is only the second team, if. Emotianji said indifferently. Elderly, could it be that you want to wait until all of them are dead before you make up your mind? A shudder ran through Li Chuanbo's body. His gaze was stern and stern. After a long while, he nodded silently. That's fine too. Fine. Let's do as you say. Emotianji's white robe fluttered as he turned around and left. At this time, action was the most practical thing to do. Li Chuanbo followed closely behind, but both he and Li Xiangxi's father's footsteps seemed unusually heavy. Under the layer of snow, Li Ju was still running crazily, constantly exposing his family's hidden ambush spot to the enemy. At this moment, young Master Li was running blindly, as if he had lost his soul. He was completely like a walking corpse. He no longer had the ability to think. He could only instinctively seek the protection of his people. Even if the people who came out were killed immediately, he would still feel safer because he saw his own people. He still had companions. Having companions was equivalent to having protection. However, he would never have thought that his foolish actions would drag his entire clan into the bottomless abyss. Behind him, there were more than 20 high-level supreme martial artists tailing him. In addition, there were 7 or 8 supreme martial artists of 7th grade and above. Their eyes shone with a cruel light. They stared at him firmly, not letting him escape. The most ridiculous thing was that those 7 or 8 supreme martial artists of 7th grade and above had another purpose, which was to protect Li Ju's life. This was because there were already several groups of Li clan members who had launched suicidal attacks in order to get rid of Li Ju. Unfortunately, under the protection of those 7 or 8 supreme martial artists of 7th grade and above, all attacks were useless. And before confirming that the Li clan members under the snow were not all dead, Li Ju must not die. This was a treasure to guide the way, a treasure to defeat the enemy. The other Li clan members would be killed the moment they appeared, but Li Ju could move freely. However, Li Ju himself did not notice this at all. He was still blindly seeking the protection of his own people, trying his best to do so. He had lost all rationality. He was actually safe. He was actually the safest Li clan member. At this moment, the only Li clan member who was safe. Save me, save me. Li Ju rushed over with disheveled hair, repeating the actions and words that he had repeated countless times. He shouted towards a cave hidden under the snow, but there was no response. He actually raised his palm and swept away the snow, revealing an extremely hidden cave. Come out and save me. I'm Li Ju. Why are you not coming out to save me? I'm being chased, I'm going to die. The people inside almost cursed. You're begging us to save you? We're begging you not to implicate us. You're going to die, why aren't you dead yet? If you're really dead, the world will be really peaceful. But since the entrance of the cave had already appeared, there was no point in hiding anymore. The 3 people inside could only choose to show themselves. Their path of survival had already been cut off, and the only meaningful thing they could do for the Li family was to kill Li Ju. Palm energy, fist energy, sword energy. These 3 people in the cave gathered their last wishes and attacked with all their strength. They only had one goal: to kill the scourge. Unfortunately, they were destined to be disappointed. At the moment when the 3 fatal attacks were about to reach Li Ju, there were several even more tyrannical forces that blocked their attacks horizontally. There were also several gentle forces that sent Li Ju out of this place of death. Then, more than 30 high-level supreme martial artists of the allied forces quickly surrounded them and attacked the cave. In just one round of attacks, 2 people had already turned into green smoke and rotten flesh before they could even leave the cave. "Ah, don't come over." Li Ju, who had already escaped from danger, was still full of fear. His pupils were dilated, and under the shouts of chase, he scrambled to escape, shouting, "Save me, save me, save me." The terrain was gradually rising. Although Li Ju didn't feel it, the faces of the allied forces behind him were full of seriousness. The Li clan had sent out a total of 4 teams, all of which were hidden under the snow. The first 2 teams that came out were now almost completely wiped out, and this area was close to the ambush location of the other 2 teams. They couldn't help but raise their vigilance. At this time, Mo Tianji had already returned to the mountain peak. He had entered an extremely hidden cave, his right hand pressed down somewhere, and this cave was enveloped by the 3 light formations. It was as hard as iron and stone. Suddenly, Mo Tianji leaped up. Here, there were 3 unusually complicated formations. All of them were set up with purple crystal jade essence, emitting a dazzling radiance. The entire cave was illuminated by the purple crystal jade essence, as if it was a colorful illusion, magnificent and brilliant. Mo Tianji walked to the center of the formation and stood there with his eyes closed. Li Chuanbo heaved a long sigh. Mo Tianji slowly stretched out his hand. At this moment, his hand suddenly turned transparent like white jade. A golden copper coin suddenly appeared in his hand. After a series of flips, it suddenly floated into the air at the same time, forming a small starry formation, emitting an unusually dazzling radiance. Then, it floated into the center of the sunlight formation. Under a series of flashes, the sunlight formation emitted a dazzling white light. Along with the purple crystal jade essence around it, it shattered and turned into nothingness. The sunlight formation has been officially activated. Mo Tianji let out a muffled snort. His face turned pale. Then he said calmly, "Inform everyone to continue hiding. Don't come out at all, lest they get implicated and get caught in the crossfire." Li Xiangxi immediately gave the order. The Li clan members on the mountain peak all disappeared without a trace. A dense flow of air was activated, shooting straight into the sky and merging with the rising sun. The sunlight in the air actually showed some strange changes, as if some strange change was happening. Then under the layer of snow, a buzzing sound seemed to be coming from deep underground. After the Li clan members who were lying in ambush felt this vibration, they seemed to have received some kind of signal. Without prior agreement, they charged out from their respective hidden caves and attacked the enemy with all their might. The suddenness of this moment really caught them off guard. The experts of the allied forces who had had a smooth journey thus far were much less vigilant because of the previous battles. Under this sudden attack, they actually felt somewhat unprepared. In a moment, quite a number of people lost their lives under this strange attack. The reason why this surprise attack could be so successful was mainly due to 3 aspects. Firstly, the Allied forces' previous battles had been too smooth, so their vigilance was naturally much lower. Secondly, the location of the battle was under the layer of snow after all. It was the battle location that the Li clan was most familiar with. On the Allied forces' side, the only person who could contend with the Li clan in this aspect, the Ling clan, who was equally familiar with fighting in snow, was not here. This was also an important reason why the Li clan's surprise attack was successful this time. And the most important reason was that Li Ju was only familiar with the ambush locations of the first 2 teams. As for the other 2 teams, he basically knew nothing about them. It was precisely because of this great misfortune that there was an opportunity left for this desperate counterattack. It also left an opportunity for Mo Tianji and the entire Li clan to turn the situation around. However, a momentary glory had nothing to do with eternity. After all, The Allied forces had the advantage in numbers. Whether it was in terms of numbers or the level of their experts, they were far superior to the Li clan. After a moment of panic, they quickly stabilized their footing, and both sides began to fight underground. No one chased after Li Ju anymore. The Li clan members wanted to kill the traitor, but they were powerless. They had already exhausted all their strength to fight against the strong enemy in front of them. They really did not have the energy to deal with that scum of the clan. As for the Allied forces, Li Ju was already a completely useless piece of trash. Such a useless piece of trash. No one was willing to take another look at him. Chapter 1535. For people like Li Ju, as long as their nature was understood, they would be despised, and ignored no matter when and where. Of course, Li Ju didn't know that he had been ignored. At this moment, he was still completely immersed in being chased by countless people. He was running for his life like a whirlwind, rushing out of the canyon. His only thought was, I want to run for my life. I want to live. Underground, thousands of people were fighting. On the ground, Wuxia vaguely felt a sudden vibration. Although his expression was unchanged, he couldn't help but feel surprised. He was now in the middle of a battle with Mo Tianji. Any abnormal movement could be caused by the other party. Wuxia didn't dare to be careless. He also attached great importance to this battle. There seems to be some movement in the sky. Yi Xiaoyao looked up and muttered, but he didn't take it too seriously. There is movement in the sky. Although the speaker didn't mean it, the listener did. Wuxia immediately stood up and walked out. What movement? When did it start? Just now. There seems to be some changes in the sunlight. But it's normal now. Yi Xiaoyao didn't take it seriously. It should be a special weather change in the northwest. Just now it suddenly brightened. I have to say that the sun hasn't appeared in the northwest for hundreds of thousands of years. When the sun comes out, all kinds of rare things happen. I'll let these bumpkins see what the sun is. The few supreme martial artists beside him found his words interesting. They all laughed along. But then they found that Wuxia's face had turned serious. They couldn't help but stop laughing. Since the farce 2 days ago, Xiao Chunyu had given a strict order. No one under him could go against Wuxia's orders. Those who disobeyed would be severely punished. Wuxia softly said, "Oh." He quickly walked out of the tent. He put his hand on his forehead and looked at the sky. At this moment, the rising sun in the sky was like a warm fireball. But at this moment, it suddenly turned into an extremely dazzling white. A round beam of light suddenly shone down from the sun. It was like a heaven-shaking divine sword shooting straight down. Its target was the Three Lights Grand Formation from before. It actually enveloped the entire Three Lights Grand Formation. Wuxia and the others were staring at the sky with their eyes wide open. Suddenly, a strong light struck them. Everyone let out a scream of surprise. Their eyes were sore and unbearable. Tears started to flow out of their eyes. Fortunately, this group of people was strong, and their bodies were far stronger than ordinary people. If it was someone with a lower cultivation base, their eyes would definitely be gone. After the aurora, the people who were temporarily blinded had a new feeling. Their surroundings suddenly became hot. One had to know that this was the Great Northwest. It was windy and frosty all year round, and the temperature was frighteningly low. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that even a person's urine would freeze before it even touched the ground. It wasn't a rare thing to even turn into a thin ice strip. Therefore, in the Northwest, there had always been a saying, "Be careful when you pee. Move at any time. Once an icicle rises, even birds will stiffen." In other words, when you pee, you must pee while walking. If you don't move, an icicle will quickly form. Maybe even your thing will freeze and stiffen. There was once someone who had encountered such an awkward situation. His movement was a little slow. In the end, he had to reach out and break off the frozen part while peeing. In the end, he didn't get his thing. Unfortunately, it was a great fortune. Back to the main topic. To actually feel hot in such a place, isn't that a little too inconceivable? If not for the fact that many people had the same feeling, they would definitely think that it was an illusion. But now they really had such a feeling. Motherfucker, my eyes. Motherfucker, my eyes are also hurting. Motherfucker, what's going on? Why is the damn sunlight suddenly so bright? It's hurting my eyes. Hey, why is it so hot? Yes, it's really hot. What's going on? This is the Northwest, the coldest place in the world. This is really motherfucker hard to understand. How can the Northwest be so hot? Oh my eyes, motherfucker. Wuxia Ro was also not lucky enough to escape this disaster. His eyes were also extremely sore and tears were flowing down. However, he didn't make a fuss like the others, because he suddenly thought of an extremely terrifying possibility. Moreover, this possibility was too big. Ignoring the pain in his eyes, he closed his eyes and gathered his martial power. He exhaled and shouted, "Everyone quickly withdraw from here. Danger! Extreme danger, quickly! What's the situation? Why do we have to withdraw? Yes, what's going on? Is it an enemy attack?" Countless noisy questions arose one after another, but only a few people responded to Wuxia Ro. At this moment, the situation had changed. The stronger ones would rather stay in place and deal with the changes by staying put. The weaker ones didn't dare to act rashly. For a moment, very few people listened to Wuxia Ro's order to withdraw. Fortunately, Wuxia Ro couldn't see at this moment. Otherwise, he would have been angered to death by this group of people. What's going on? Did the enemy make a move again? Xiao Qinyu hurried over. He walked all the way and felt that it would be fine even if he was naked. Moreover, the temperature was still continuing to increase. There was no reasonable explanation for such a strange situation, if it wasn't caused by the enemy. If I'm not wrong, this is a killing trap caused by the three lights great array. Wuxia Ro said, "Immediately gather everyone and leave at full speed. Otherwise we may really be roasted by the sun. No matter how strong a person is, he can't fight against the heavens." Xiao Qinyu was shocked. He hastily issued an order. Xiao Qinyu's order was naturally incomparable to Wuxia Ro's. Everyone didn't have any doubts. They displayed their agility skills and rushed back like the wind. The three lights great array can draw the power of the three lights of the stars in the sky. It can stabilize the mountains and rivers, and make the mountains and rivers eternal. This is a relatively common saying. Wuxia Ro was somewhat envious. He said with some regret, "But there is another absurd saying. The operation of the three lights great array can draw the power of the three lights down to the lower realm and destroy everything with the supreme power of the stars." This saying is too extreme. Moreover, no one has really seen it. So no one believes it. Therefore, the insiders believe that this is an exaggerated and absurd saying. But this time, Mo Tianji should have obtained some kind of fortuitous encounter. He should have obtained the real mystery of the operation of the three lights great array. He turned the absurd into the truth, and turned the old legend into the legend of the present. Therefore, this is a killing formation that can't be resisted by a person. We have no place to hide. Everyone must withdraw from the area covered by the three lights great array as soon as possible. Otherwise, there is no way to survive. Wuxia Ro explained in a hurried voice as he walked. There is such a tyrannical killing formation. Well, what about the people in the valley below? Xiao Qinyu was shocked. There were more than 1,300 people in the valley. They were the elite forces of various big clans. The situation was so critical now. How could he inform them to withdraw? Would they make it in time? It's too late. We are already very lucky to be able to withdraw in time. We can't care about them, especially now that they are thousands of feet under the snow. It's definitely too late. Wuxia Ro sighed sadly. Xiao Qinyu was stunned when he heard this. Even his rapid footsteps slowed down. While the allied forces were retreating at full speed, the sunlight from the sky had already turned into a huge fire dragon, completely enveloping the entire three lights great array. Due to the influence of the three lights great array, even the supreme level experts couldn't do anything about the accumulated snow on the mountaintop. The snow had been accumulated for hundreds of thousands of years. At this moment, it was melting rapidly and turned into molten iron, rushing downwards. In the valley, the buried snow was also melting rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. Drops of it seeped downwards. Because the temperature was too high, it had just melted when it turned into boiling water. As the temperature got higher and higher, a burst of steam evaporated. However, It didn't have time to evaporate and turned into molten lava, rushing downwards. What was the concept of hundreds of thousands of years of snow melting together? This was an absolutely impossible scene. However, it happened today. At the top of the valley, Li Ju's head popped out in a daze. He was attacked by the hot water head-on. He was completely unprepared. He screamed and almost fainted on the spot. He could barely see the current situation clearly. It could be said that his soul had left his body. He jumped up desperately and rushed outside. He used all his strength to protect his body and resist the external pressure. However, he didn't walk more than 1,000 feet before he was covered in wounds. His flesh was badly mutilated and blisters were all over his body. However, Li Ju didn't seem to feel any pain at this moment. He was like a walking corpse. He ran all the way by instinct and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Rumble, rumble, rumble. In the surrounding mountains and valleys, the hundreds of thousands of years of snow and ice gradually melted. The river flowed downwards like a dam bursting. This was no longer the galloping of thousands of horses. It was believed that even if millions of horses galloped together, the momentum would be just like this. Along the way, the steam rose and covered the sky. Slowly, the snow on the ground also began to melt layer by layer. Layer by layer, it disappeared. It didn't take long for the snow on the top of the mountain to melt. Perhaps it was because the temperature was too high. Even some of the stones had begun to melt, turning into layers of grease-like substance. As more and more of the melted stones were formed, they began to gather, converge, and then flow downwards. The temperature of the three lights' great array had risen to an unimaginable level. Chapter 1536. Just a moment ago, the surface layer was still melting, but the next moment, it had already formed a torrent, rushing down the mountain peak and into the canyon. All the surrounding mountains had a surface layer that was several feet thick melted. Under the influence of the extremely high temperature, streams of lava actually formed on the mountain peak and flowed into the canyon. Regarding these unimaginable and miraculous changes, the people from both sides who were still fighting intensely under the layer of snow were completely unaware. August 9th reading, they were completely unaware that something infinitely terrifying was rapidly approaching. The layer of snow melted too quickly. There was still a layer of ice and snow below, but there was already boiling water above. It was almost completely skipping the process of cold water. After that, it was still lava. After it was completely filled, there was still some distance between it and the bottom layer of snow. With this distance between them and the people below, who were fighting with their lives on the line, how could they possibly notice anything? But the barrier was the layer of snow, and it was just a layer of snow. Under such high temperature, how long could a mere layer of snow last? The rumbling sounds were endless, and the magma had already transformed into a bright red color, filling up the entire slanting valley. Where the thick mist rose, the magma inside continued to bubble, and it was still gradually sinking downwards. Li Xiangxi and Li Chuanbo closed their eyes at the same time. If they went down like this, no one below, regardless of their cultivation level, would be able to escape alive. The outcome was already decided. They would perish together. And in the true sense of the word, they would be annihilated. They had originally planned to perish together with the invading enemy. Now that they are together in life and death, it is not an unacceptable outcome for them to turn into smoke on the same day and return to heaven and earth. Although Li Xiangxi said this, he sighed deeply. Rather than saying that he was consoling Li Chuanbo, it was better to say that he was consoling himself. There is only one life in a person's life. There is only one spring in a person's life. Li Chuanbo turned around. His voice was cold and hard as he said, "To be able to perish together with the enemy is the most glorious ending for us men. Li Clan's younger brother will definitely not drag out an ignoble existence. Returning like this is the majesty of heaven and earth. I only have a strong sense of pride. Where is their sorrow?" Mo Tianji said indifferently, "This is war." He sneered and said, "This is the final killing formation." This formation was irresistible, but it required time to operate. If there wasn't enough distraction, the enemy would have too much time to escape. My original intention was to trigger the final battle, and then use the ground below as an ambush base. Once the battle started, the arrangements below would definitely be able to take the initiative, stand out, kill, and pin down the enemy, and then launch the final battle here. Then, we'll lure everyone inside. That way, we'll have enough time to bury everyone inside. Be it friend or foe, we'll perish together. However, I had never thought that Li Ju would act on his own initiative. He would act rashly without thinking, and bring about a change in the situation. And this ambush would be ruined. Since we can't take the initiative here, we can't trigger the enemy's crisis. And Wuxia won't send any more reinforcements. So this arrangement can only be launched in advance. Originally, we expected to be able to bury more than 10,000 people here. But now we've only buried less than 2,000. This is far from our expectations. Indeed, man proposes, God disposes. Mo Tianji sighed and said, according to my most ideal plan, if everyone here were to perish together, the Li clan would naturally have room to maneuver when the enemy's reinforcements arrived. Or, we might even be able to leave some seeds behind. At least, we wouldn't have to sacrifice those women and children, and that foundation. But now, everything is just empty talk. Although it's a little cruel to perish together here. And it's also very hurtful to heaven and humanity. It's to protect hundreds of thousands of women and children. There's still a price to pay. But I didn't expect. Mo Tianji sneered and said, haha, so what if I've calculated everything? An unexpected human factor changed the outcome. And Li Ju is a pig. You've ruined my entire plan. And from this moment on, the Li clan has truly fallen into a desperate situation. A chance of survival? It's completely gone. I have no chance of survival for your Li clan. I can only pray that the final formation will work. Everyone was silent as if they were in despair. Everyone in the Li clan lowered their heads. Previously, there was still hope. Of course, they had sacrificed themselves, but there was still hope for the survival of their women and children. But now, even the last remaining hope had been lost. How could they not be in despair? Yet even though they were in despair, they still didn't know what to say, and could only remain silent. After a while, Li Chuanbo gritted his teeth and said, Li Ju, this bastard. Even if he dies 10,000 times, he won't be able to make up for the loss this time. It's really too easy for him to die here this time. At this moment, Li Chuanbo didn't know that Li Ju, whom both sides wanted to kill, was actually still alive. He was even the only survivor of the decisive battle under the snow. Far away, Xiao Qinyu and the others were all standing high in the air. The best way to avoid such a natural disaster was to stay away from all kinds of disasters. And the best place to go was the sky. Even the weakest among the Allied forces had the ability to control the air. At this moment, looking at the lava in this entire canyon, even though they were already dozens of miles away, they could still feel the hot air blowing toward them. Even their beards were all scorched. The layer of snow below them was still melting rapidly. The place where they were originally standing had already turned into a vast ocean at this moment. Looking at the fog that rose into the sky, everyone's faces turned pale. A few of them didn't have strong wills. They were so panicked that they were trembling all over. No one would have thought that Mo Tianji actually had such a vicious trick up his sleeve. It turned out that the true meaning of the 3-light array to stabilize the mountains and rivers was to turn this place into a huge iron pot. In the end, everyone would be cooked in the pot. Diwu Qingrou's forehead was full of cold sweat. Taking a deep breath, he said, "It's a fluke." A fluke? Everyone gave him a sidelong glance. Clearly, they were very puzzled, and even somewhat disgusted. So many people on our side have been trapped inside, and you still say it's a fluke? If this is a fluke, then what isn't a fluke? Thinking back, I can now conclude that this is definitely the final killing trap that Mo Tianji set up. It's also a decisive move to perish together with the enemy and perish together. Diwu Qingru wiped the sweat on his forehead and said, "I think that something special must have happened down there. It doesn't have enough conditions to attract us down there anymore. Therefore, Mo Tianji started this trap ahead of time. Because if he insisted on not starting it, the change down there might have caused him to not be able to take advantage of this final advantage. Even if he had a killing move, it would have been useless." Diwu Qingru smiled bitterly. "Everyone, You can try to think about it. If something didn't happen down there, we would have been at a disadvantage once the decisive battle started. What would we have done? We would have supported them with all our strength. Otherwise, would we have gone down there to fight if all the members of the other side had gathered in the canyon? No matter what the reason was, who would have been able to escape if we had gone down and started a chaotic battle? Who would have been confident that they would have been able to escape? When everyone thought about it, they couldn't help but shudder. Their complexions had turned into the color of corpses. Their eyes were full of fear as they looked at the other side. They only felt a chill creeping up their spines. In this incomparably hot time, they still felt an endless chill that sent chills down their spines. Indeed, if that was really the case, even if it was Xiao Qinyu, it was very likely that he would have been held back by Li Chuanbo. In that case, he wouldn't have been able to escape, and could only die on the spot. Luck, it was really luck. It was really luck. It was really too lucky. I didn't expect that Mo Tianji to set up such a vicious killing trap. Xiao Qinyu's lips trembled as he said with a pale face. This can't be said to be vicious. What are we here for? What's the purpose? Diwu Qingru said somewhat mockingly. We were here to exterminate the Li clan. Even if the other party's methods are more vicious than this, it's only right. It's only right to use every means possible. I can only say that Mo Tianji is indeed a learned man. He has already obtained the true essence of formations in the world. I'm not as good as him. Diwu Qingrou's eyes were filled with envy. If I can obtain the inheritance of such a marvelous formation, I can also. Diwu Qingru lowered his gaze. While he was admiring, he thought in his heart, if I were Mo Tianji, I would definitely not use this killing trap now. Even if the Li clan were to be wiped out, even if I were to lose for a while, so what? If this formation was used during the Tianding Grand Meeting, it would definitely be able to wipe out all the experts of the big clans and law enforcement officers in one fell swoop. If the millions of experts who participated in this meeting were all turned into smoke, wouldn't it be easy to unify the heavens? Mo Tianji, you're still not ruthless enough. In terms of ruthlessness, you're not as good as me. You, Mo Tianji, are not as good as me, Diwu Qingru. Under the layer of snow. At this moment, the people from both sides who were still fighting fiercely had also started to feel the heat. It was suffocating, as if they were in a steamer. As they fought, they were somewhat surprised. What's going on? After this period of frenzied killing and fighting, the people from the Li clan were almost all dead. Even if they were lucky enough to survive, most of them were seriously injured. Few of them were in good health. The experts from the allied forces were naturally more powerful. Already, some of them could spare some time to observe the surrounding terrain. Something's not right. Why is it so hot here? This temperature is too strange. One of them was a little puzzled. This is thousands of feet under the layer of snow. It shouldn't be so hot. It's so hot that I'm sweating all over. What's going on? Why do I feel that the top is red? One of them shouted. Everyone felt the strange atmosphere at this moment. They stopped what they were doing and looked up at the same time. They saw that the dark layer of snow above their heads, which they couldn't see anything at first, was now showing a dark red color. At the same time, a wave of heat that was enough to drive people crazy was already coming down from above. In fact, the temperature was still rising. What's going on? What's going on? A 7th grade supreme martial artist shouted. What's going on? As he spoke, he stretched out his hand and hit out with his palm. Chapter 1537. Part 7 Chapter 835. Mutual Destruction. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. His words were still echoing. That palm actually made a huge hole in the originally indestructible snow layer. The snow layer in front melted into a puff of green smoke, and then the surging magma flowed in, unstoppable. That 7th grade supreme martial artist was the first to bear the brunt. He was completely unprepared, and didn't even know what was happening. His head was already smashed by the magma, and then his whole body was submerged in it. He only had time to let out a scream, before his whole body started to rot. 9. Reading network. It was a calamity that was worthy of its name. He hurriedly circulated his energy, trying to relieve his injuries, and resist the external attack. However, at this time, it was already completely useless. He screamed miserably, but the magma flowed into his mouth at the right time. In an instant, a puff of green smoke rose, and his whole body had already evaporated without a trace. Everyone at the side had already hidden far away when they saw that the situation was not right. However, they looked at this horrifying scene in horror. Even though it was already extremely hot now, everyone felt that their hands and feet were cold, as if they had fallen into an ice cave. What's going on? A supreme martial artist shouted, as if he was about to cry. A 7th grade supreme martial artist was annihilated so cleanly. Could he be lucky enough to escape? How could he be so capable? At this moment, the dark red color above their heads became thicker and thicker. The gap there gradually expanded, and the magma flowed in endlessly. Everyone wanted to resist, but there was no way to do so. They could only blindly hide in all directions. However, a sea of magma had already rapidly formed on the ground, and it was still continuing to spread rapidly. If they kept hiding, how long could they hide for? Where could they hide in the end? Everyone's hearts were filled with despair. The dark red color above their heads was obviously all magma. When they looked up again, the space above their heads within a radius of thousands of feet was all this dark red color. Where else could they escape to? This was thousands of feet under the snow layer. Isn't this the fucking Northwest? Isn't this a fucking snow layer? A supreme martial artist of the Allied forces shouted in fear and anger. Fucking hell, where did this magma come from? Isn't this a scam? Ha 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 ha. A surviving supreme martial artist of the Li clan laughed maniacally, even tears flowing out. Good. A big family, how impressive. Besieging the Li clan, what a strong murderous aura. Ha ha ha. Isn't he still going to perish together with the Li clan? Let's all die together. So what? What else can you do? Ha 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 ha, this is great. You want to destroy my home. You want to cut off my descendants. You all deserve to die here today. He roared loudly. All the experts in the alliance glared at him, but they couldn't refute his words. No matter what, mutual destruction was already a foregone conclusion. There was no point in arguing any further. The dark red color above their heads was becoming more and more intense. This meant that the layer of snow above their heads, the last obstacle, was getting shorter and shorter. This also meant that everyone's time to survive was getting shorter and shorter. However, no one could do anything about it. Everyone here was a top-notch expert. Needless to say, they were usually strong-willed and wouldn't even blink if they were attacked by swords and sabers. But now, under the influence of the approaching threat of death, their wills had long been shattered. The only thought in their minds was that there would be some miracle that could stop this calamity of death and save them from death. That supreme martial artist of the Li clan suddenly laughed maniacally and jumped up. You bunch of bastards, stop dreaming about any fucking miracles. Die early and reincarnate early. Don't I still have to accompany you? So what if I die first? I'll let you take advantage of me again. Then, with the last of his strength, he struck out dozens of consecutive palms. Amidst the maniacal laughter, cracking sounds rang out. Boom, 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 boom. The entire layer of snow above them collapsed at an accelerated rate due to the impact of this wave of palm energy. It completely collapsed. The magma that originally had nowhere to go suddenly found a way and completely flooded the place in an instant. The maniacal laughter of that supreme martial artist of the Li clan continued. At this time, the magma had already drowned him, but he actually held on and used the skeleton of his right hand to tear off his left hand. He laughed and said, Die! Die! With the raise of his hand, he threw out his left hand. His entire palm exploded. Using his blood as an attack, he blasted the layer of snow again. Perhaps it was the will of the heavens, but the last layer of snow also collapsed. That supreme martial artist of the Li clan's laughter was still reverberating, but he had already disappeared from the world. It was just that his journey to the netherworld was destined not to be lonely. A series of desperate screams rang out instantly, filling the place. No matter if you were a martial saint expert, a first grade or second grade supreme martial artist, or a third grade or fourth grade supreme martial artist, or a fifth grade, or even higher, Everyone's reaction was the same. In the face of this certain death disaster, no one was an exception. Under such a magma canopy, there were no blind spots in all directions. Even a second-grade supreme martial artist could only close his eyes and wait for death. There wasn't even a chance to drag anyone down with him. Everyone had to travel together in the netherworld and the netherworld. There was only the helplessness and grievance of sorrow and despair. When people took a bath in the bathhouse, they were all equally clean and smooth. There was no difference at all. But right now there was no difference at all. In the face of certain death, no one was an exception. The magma fell rapidly and gradually rose. In just a moment, it had already drowned everyone. Then there was another violent tremor. Then, the magma rose with a whirlpool, completely turning this canyon into a sea of magma. On the magma, a few heads opened their eyes in despair. The next moment, the magma tumbled, and these few heads also disappeared without a trace. The magma above continued to fall, but its momentum was already much weaker, because the sunlight that fell from the sky was already gone. The morning sun hung weakly in the sky. It emitted a gloomy warmth. But this entire land, thousands of miles of land, had already turned into a scorching hot midsummer. No, even during the hottest days of summer, there definitely wouldn't be such a huge force. Or rather, it should be a volcanic crater. And it was the hottest volcanic crater. Crackling sounds rang continuously on the ground. That was countless layers of ice still spreading outwards and melting. The whole area was rapidly expanding outwards at an astonishing speed visible to the naked eye, gradually converging into a river or a sea. Rippling waves. Rippling light. In the distance it was still covered in silver, a world of ice and snow. This place, on the other hand, was filled with clear blue waves, quiet and peaceful. Such a strange scene could be said to be the #1 wonder in the world. Not only was it unprecedented, it might not be replicated in the future. However, who would have thought that such a miraculous scene was caused by such a tragic event? Infinite water vapor rapidly gathered in the sky. Then, after a moment, the intense intersection of cold and heat actually caused lightning to flash and thunder to rumble, and hail to fall with a crackling sound. The scorching temperature of the whole world dropped rapidly after the end of the sunlight-killing trap. Diwu Qingru, Xiao Chenyu and the rest were all dumbfounded. Lucky, they were really too lucky. Looking at the newly formed jade-green waves beneath their feet, and then looking at the boiling magma, that was almost at the same level as the mountain range. Everyone felt an indescribable ghastly chill rising from their heels, passing through their calves, thighs, back, and neck, all the way to the top of their heads. Everyone shuddered at the same time. Really ruthless. At the side, Wu Jueqing stood majestically in a secluded cave on the precipitous peak. He used a large piece of profound ice to seal the entrance of the cave, and even used his own power to maintain it. Lava poured down from above. Both Mo Qinggu and Chu Luer's little faces were deathly pale. Dong Wuxiang shook his neck as if nothing had happened, and Chu Yang could still talk cheerfully at this moment. The two of them didn't take it seriously. Mo Layer's heart also skipped a beat. She said, "Wuxiang, you can really keep your composure." Dong Wuxiang was stunned. "What's there to be anxious about? If it doesn't fall, there's naturally no need to worry. If Elder Wu can't block it, then there's even less need to worry." Mo Layer stared at him. She knew that this guy was careless, but she didn't expect him to be careless to this extent. Chu Yang laughed loudly and clapped his hands. "Exactly. Wuxiang is so right." Mo Layer, Mo Qinggu and Chu Luo rolled their eyes at the same time. This Mo Tianji, he didn't even tell us in advance that he was causing such a big thing. Wu Jueqing was rather annoyed. "He almost scared my disciple. When I go back, I'll settle the score with him properly. If I don't see any compensation for the mental damage, see if I can forgive that little brat." Chu Yang and Dong Wuxiang looked at each other stunned. This lord is actually thinking about this kind of thing at such a time. Our nonchalant chatter and laughter obviously can't be compared. On the other side. "Fuck. That bastard Mo Tianji," GMO scolded angrily. "If not for the fact that this place prepared by second brother Gu is well hidden and deep enough, wouldn't all of us be floating in there? What a fucking trap, we're still virgins." Aoshian said. Don't fucking say that. We're already lucky enough here. So what if we're floating in there? But if Rui Butong is in there, that's really ugly. A bird is already ugly enough. If he becomes a bald bird, how will he face the ancestors of the phoenix race? Everyone's faces were originally dark, but when they heard this, they couldn't help but burst into laughter. If it were any other time, even if Rui Butong didn't have much of a heart, he would definitely be embarrassed and mock Aoshian. Unexpectedly, Rui Butong only stared at the lava in the distance, as if deep in thought. He actually didn't hear Aoshian's ridicule. Everyone was a little surprised. This didn't seem like Rui Butong's character. If he heard Aoshian say this in the past, the most likely thing he would do would be to fight with him. He might even be implicated. Why was he so quiet today? Was he really angry? That couldn't be, right? Rui Butong suddenly stood up. Xie Danxiong and Gu Duxing, who were working together to seal the door with ice at the entrance, were shocked. Where are you going? Chapter 1538. I'm going out to play, Rui Butong said. There was a hint of impatience and excitement in his voice. Everyone looked at him worriedly. Luo Kadi put his hand on Rui Butong's forehead and said suspiciously, Is this guy crazy? I was just joking with you. I didn't mean any harm. If you're not happy, I'll help you say he's Azure Dragon. If you're not satisfied, we'll all say he's Azure Dragon. Get lost. Am I such a narrow-minded person? Do you think I'm you? Rui Butong slapped Luo Kadi's hand away. He looked at the concerned gazes of his brothers, and couldn't help but feel a burst of warmth in his heart. He said, I said that I have an important matter to attend to. Have you forgotten? I'm from the Phoenix race. I naturally have an indescribable desire for such hot things. Plus, this kind of heat can increase my cultivation by a lot. This is an environment that can't be found in ordinary cultivation. The phoenix's rebirth in fire is also the same. Everyone suddenly realized. Gu Duxing and Xie Danxiong let go of his hand. Rui Butong let out a shrill cry and rushed out. He rushed into the sea of lava outside. Under everyone's gaze, Rui Butong was like a phoenix flapping its wings and flying. He circled in the air, and then fell 5,000 feet straight down into the deep sea of lava. Huge waves of lava splashed into the sky, sinking into the ground with a gurgling sound. GMO bit his finger, and couldn't help but shiver. He said to Luo Kadi, Wolf, why do I feel that this guy is committing suicide? Why am I so worried? Luo Kadi said angrily, Don't call me Wolf. It's so corny. It's so disgusting. Bah, you're dreaming. You're a wolf, not a man. GMO said, I've always called you Wolf wrongly. Aren't you called Wolf Sword? Why don't I call you Wretched Wolf? Puff. Luo Kadi punched GMO in the face. Suddenly, Luo Kadi's eyes turned red. Luo Kadi became furious. I was talking to you with good intentions. How dare you hit me? He punched back. Luo Kadi fell backwards, and his nose started to bleed. Soon after, the two of them started to fight, rolling around on the ground. Their mouths were cursing, but their hands and feet were not idle. When they were anxious, they would simply use their teeth to bite. The battle of the century between loneliness and wolf. The show was on. The other brothers watched helplessly from the sidelines. This kind of battle of the century was not something that could be said to happen every day. Even the heavens wouldn't be able to understand if life could still be boring with these two living treasures. So lonely waves. Not good. Suddenly, Gu Duxing slapped his forehead, and was about to rush out when Xie Danxiong hurriedly pulled him back. What are you doing? I'm talking about second brother Gu. Rui Butong dares to go out because he's a phoenix. But what kind of bird are you, old second Gu? Gu Duxing was so anxious that his eyes were red. This bastard shouldn't have gone down. This is going to be ruined. This time it's ruined. Underneath is the three-light formation. Once the magma cools down, the entire mountain and the earth will become one. Even if Rui Butong isn't roasted, he's deep underground. How can he get out? When he said that, the brothers looked at each other in dismay. Yes, they were in the three lights formation now. Rui Butong had jumped into the magma so recklessly. This was really difficult to deal with. That won't do either. Xie Danxiong frowned. Even if Rui Butong is trapped inside, we can't go down. We'll only be trapped together with him. There's no effect at all. Besides, Rui Butong is fine. If you go down, you'll immediately turn into a wisp of smoke. We can only think of another way. Or let Mo Tianji go to the Three Lights formation immediately after the battle. Xie Danxiong said. Yes, this is the only way now. Ao Xian frowned deeply. Besides, we can't think of everything as the worst. Since Rui Butong dares to go down, if he doesn't have a grasp of the situation, how can he be so rash? I'm just afraid that he's been blinded by greed. Gu Duxing sighed and stomped his feet repeatedly. Xie Danxiong frowned and sighed. From this, it can also be seen that we are still lacking. If Mo Tianji or Big Brother were here, they would definitely remember these things at all times. But we, the brothers, sighed in unison. No matter what, this kind of mistake must not be made again. Gu Duxing said word by word. This kind of feeling is really too torturous. Yes, the brothers nodded. But GMO, Luo Kadi and Dong Wushang can be an exception. Gu Duxing glanced coldly and said, These three fellows are brainless at all. He sighed and looked worriedly at the cooling magma sea outside. He frowned and didn't say anything. GMO and Luo Kadi, who were innocently implicated, opened their mouths wide. They grimaced, rolled their eyes and lowered their heads. They cursed 7 or 8 times in their hearts. This second brother Gu, when Rui Butong comes out, the two of us will definitely join forces to give you a good beating. On the other side, Tan Tan and the Divine Clan experts were stunned. Pure energy of the sun. Oh my God. An elder of the Sun clan was almost kneeling on the ground. He looked at all of this with a feverish passion, his whole body trembling. Tan Tan snorted and said, What a good for nothing. Can you accept such energy of the sun if it's given to you? You overestimate yourself. What are you coveting? Everyone kept quiet out of fear. However, Tan Tan was also thinking about something. If Mo Tianji could trigger the 3 lights to come down to the lower realm, then, could he set up a small 3 lights great formation? Let this great demon king refine his demonic body, refine his demonic soul, and ascend to the level of a demon god. As he thought about it and thought about its beauty, a lewd smile couldn't help but appear at the corners of his lips. At the side, Guigu, who was supporting the ice against the magma single-handedly, saw this and shuddered at once. Going against his conscience, he said, King is really too cool today. Tan Tan flicked his hair suavely. He pointed and said, Even cooler than this pure energy of the sun, right? Guigu weighed it very seriously, and finally decided to tell the truth. He said, Not as cool as this energy. Her. Tan Tan laughed sinisterly and said, When the battle starts later, you'll be the first to fight. Guigu was stunned. The 2 tallest mountains opposite each other were originally the positions of both parties. There were also quite a number of small peaks and the like in between. But now it was practically a flat plain. It was completely filled with magma, and was slowly bubbling and gradually cooling down. However, the surrounding temperature was still maintained at the temperature of melting gold and petrification. Within a short period of time, there was no drop in temperature. Hailstones fell down madly, only raising water vapor that covered the sky. Then they rushed up into the sky and turned into hailstones again. Chu Yang and the others were a little far away. They had already removed the ice at the entrance of the cave. A strange smell assailed their nostrils, bringing with it the coolness of hail from the sky. Mo Qinggu summoned her courage and walked to the entrance of the cave. She reached out and caught a hailstone. She couldn't help but exclaim softly, So big. This hailstone. It was actually as big as a chicken egg, and was crystal clear. Chu Luo asked sarcastically, Big, right? Yes. It's really big. You haven't seen it before, right? Very surprised, right? Feeling that she had gained the upper hand, Chu Luo was in a great mood. She hugged Chu Yang's arm and said coquettishly, Big brother, I miss Sister Z. When are we going to look for her? Chu Yang coughed dryly and put on the airs of an elder brother. He said, If you don't work hard, how are you going to look for your Sister Z in the heavenly palace? That requires cultivation, that requires conditions, that requires hard work. Chu Luo widened her big eyes in the distance. She was rather baffled. Mo Qinggu smiled gently, and said to Chu Luer, "When our cultivation reaches the required level, we'll go up to look for Sister Z together." Chu Luer was discouraged. She suddenly felt that something was wrong with her in front of Mo Qinggu. The two of them were clearly about the same age, but Mo Qinggu was very graceful and magnanimous now, as if she was much, much more mature than herself. In front of her, she actually naturally felt like, "I'm a little girl." This feeling made Chu Luer very unhappy. She said, "That's my sister Z. She's also my sister-in-law, my big brother's wife." "What does that have to do with you?" Mo Qinggu smiled slightly. "It doesn't matter. Can I take a look?" Chu Luer was defeated. She gritted her teeth. She said heavily, "I'm just afraid that Sister Z won't like to see you." Mo Qinggu said calmly, "Sister Z left me a set of martial techniques before she left. She also left me a lot of good things such as this, and this." As she spoke, she took them out one by one without looking at Chu Luer. She then kept them. "Haha, I quite like them. Although I'm not as close to my sister as you are to her." "Haha, actually it's nothing." Chu Luer was completely defeated. When Zi Xieching left, she didn't leave anything for her. But so much for Mo Qinggu. She couldn't help but glare at her for a moment, but there was nothing she could say. "The set of martial techniques that Sister Z left me is called Heavenly Dance." Mo Qinggu deliberately teased her. She said somewhat proudly, "I heard that even in the Heavenly Palace, it's the best martial technique. Sister Z is really too nice. I miss her too." Chu Luer pursed her lips and almost burst into tears. Chu Yang shook his head somewhat helplessly. He shielded Chu Luer behind him and said, "Don't bully her. It was a bit of a headache." Although Mo Qingwu's memory had recovered, her personality was more affected by this life. She was very lively, although she was also very quiet sometimes. Overall, it seemed that the personality of this life was still the dominant one. Or maybe Mo Qinggu couldn't bear to look back on her previous life, so she deliberately suppressed that personality of hers. Mo Qinggu laughed. Wu Jiuecheng, who was at the door, looked over with an unfriendly expression. Now both sides of the battle were silent. The battle was temporarily stopped. The allied forces looked over, their eyes spitting fire, as if they wanted to eat people alive. Li Chuanbua and the others stood at the top of the mountain, feeling the heat under their feet that hadn't cooled down. They stood facing the wind, not showing any signs of weakness. Everyone didn't speak, but everyone's hearts were filled with hatred. Once the battle started, it couldn't be anywhere else. Both sides could only fight in this place where their comrades would perish together. This thought had suddenly become the wish of both the enemy and our side. The hailstones above their heads were like rain, smashing fiercely on everyone's body. But no one dodged at all. Clouds of hot air rose from the surface of the sea of lava. The surface layer had already solidified. At the latest, by one night, this place would return to its cold state and become a battlefield. Everyone didn't want to drag on any longer. Chapter 1539. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Li Chuanbua stood upright at the peak of the mountain with his hands behind his back. His gaze was deep and his thoughts were far away. No one knew what he was thinking about. The members of the Li clan filed out one by one and stood quietly behind him. Other than the sound of their clothes rustling in the wind, there was no other sound. The line formed by the members of the Li clan grew longer and longer, and the number of people also grew larger and larger. Everyone was silent and just stood there quietly, staring at the place below. That place used to be hills, basins, and many undulating mountain ranges. But now it was a piece of flat land. Just flat land. Or rather, it was a graveyard. The vicissitudes of life still needed the baptism of countless years, but the changes here happened in a matter of days. Yesterday's fresh life, today's wisp of smoke. It was just that simple. Wind and thunder were still raging in the sky. Hailstones continued to fall rapidly, becoming denser and denser. The size of the hailstones also became bigger and bigger. In the end, hailstones almost the size of a fist came crashing down fiercely. The place where everyone was standing was the highest point of the nearby mountain peak, almost the place closest to the sky. There was no space for shelter at all. The hailstones falling from the sky landed solidly on everyone, but no one made any movement to dodge. They were as indifferent as if the hailstones had landed on someone else. There was nothing more sorrowful than the death of the heart. The great sorrow of the heart was so painful that it penetrated the soul. What did this little bit of pain mean to them? Back then, this place was a world of ice and snow like this. Over the past 10,000 years, in order to protect this land, countless people of the Li clan have died. In this battle to protect the clan, first, 8,000 people were willing to die and die together with the enemy. Then, another 1,300 people lost their lives here. The Li clan sent out a total of 1,120 people this time. Now 1,300 people have already died here forever. They have all gone. Their souls have left the spring, never to be seen again. Li Chuanbuo's voice was very calm and indifferent, as if he was narrating a very ordinary matter. However, when these words were spoken word by word, the eyes of everyone who heard it turned red. Many people's sobs could be heard faintly. Perhaps it may not be that they will never meet again. They are just one step ahead to fight. Tomorrow, we will also die here tomorrow. There will be no exceptions. The remaining 100 or so people here will walk the same path in the netherworld and the Yellow Springs together. Li Chuanbuo stood with his hands behind his back. Amidst the storm and hail, his sleeves fluttered in the wind. His gaze was solemn as he said, "Back then, this old man established the Li clan all by himself. Now, I will lead you to another world. This old man still wants to be the vanguard." He sneered and said, "But this land will remember that they once had the surname Li. Yes, this land will remember that they used to be surnamed Li." Everyone roared at the same time. Although they were hit by the cold hailstones, their blood was still boiling. Li Xiongtu. Li Chuanbuo didn't even turn his head as he shouted sternly, "Here." Li Xiongtu's majestic figure took a step forward and came before Li Chuanbuo. His body was riddled with wounds. Many parts of his body were wrapped in bandages and blood was seeping out of them. "This is a battle between members of the Li clan. You are not a member of the Li clan. The Li clan does not need an outsider." Li Chuanbuo's expression was calm and unruffled. His voice was cold and harsh. "Now, get out of the Li clan. Immediately, right now, get out." Li Xiongtu's expression changed drastically. "Elder Master, you dare to disobey my orders? Do you need me to repeat myself?" Li Chuanbuo said coldly. "I dare not. Although I, Li Xiongtu, also have the word Li in my name, I am not really a grandson of the Li clan. Xiongtu deeply regrets this. I have received great kindness from the Li clan time and time again, but I am unable to repay it. If it was any other time, Xiongtu would not dare to hesitate in the slightest when it came to the Elder Master's orders. However, this is a time of trouble for the Li clan, a time of life and death. If Xiongtu were to avoid the battle at this time, how would he have the face to stand in this world? A real man seeks to be open and aboveboard with a clear conscience. Xiongtu's strength is low, but he is still willing to fight to the death against the enemy. No matter how powerful the enemy is, we will try our best to contend with him. Even if we can't win in the end, it's not a big deal. If we perish together with him, we will still have a chance." Li Xiongtu's expression was fierce as he said, "No matter what, I, Li Xiongtu, will definitely not be afraid of death and run away." Li Chuanbuo was silent for a moment before he said, "Idiot, can't you hear what I said? You are not running away from the battle. I am the one who chased you out of the Li clan. Can you still understand human language?" Li Xiongtu straightened his neck and said furiously, "I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. Not leaving. Who do you think you are? How can my words be something that you can bargain with? You're even rebelling against me." Li Chuanbuo's expression turned cold. Suddenly, he raised his palm and actually struck down heavily on the top of Li Xiongtu's head. Based on Li Chuanbuo's cultivation, it was useless no matter how Li Xiongtu tried to guard against it. Furthermore, Li Xiongtu had never expected this old man to actually attack him directly. His eyes rolled back, and before he could even say anything, he collapsed onto the ground unconscious. Li Chuanbuo said indifferently, "Mo Tianji, I'll leave this little one to you. He won't wake up within 3 days." Mo Tianji sighed softly and said, "All right. I understand what elderly means. Please don't worry." Li Chuanbo was silent for a moment before he said, "Don't ever forget the agreement we made back then. And the matter of yearning. Don't ever forget." Mo Tianji nodded. "Don't worry, elderly. I definitely won't forget. I, Mo Tianji, still have this bit of credibility." Li Chuanbo nodded. "That's for the best." Mo Tianji was silent for a moment before he said, "Elderly, although our Three Lights Great Formation has already activated the Sunlight Formation, we still have the Moonlight Formation and Starlight Formation that can be used. There's still room for negotiation." After he finished speaking, he was silent for a long while before he said, "Regarding Elder Li's decision, we should consider it carefully. Shouldn't we consider it again?" Li Chuanbo shook his head slightly. His movements were unusually light but very firm. "At this moment, it's me who doesn't want to drag this on any longer." Li Chuanbo slowly turned around and looked at his descendants. He said, "Look at these people. Which one of them doesn't have thousands of years of experience? Those who have already died are more or less the grandchildren of these people. You're still young. You don't know how it feels to watch your grandchildren die in front of your eyes. This isn't something that can be explained with words. We all know that as long as you're given a certain amount of time to activate the Starlight Formation and Moonlight Formation, you might really be able to bury another batch of enemies. But do you have the confidence to annihilate all of them?" Mo Tianji was silent. He said, "This isn't about whether or not I have the confidence. It's about whether or not I can do it. It's too unrealistic. If it was before the Sunlight Killing Formation was exposed, there might still be a chance. But now, yes, it's unrealistic. It's impossible." Li Chuanbo smiled sadly. "Actually, the most important point is that our enemies are far from just the ones in front of us. The other party's foundation hasn't even been shaken yet. Not to mention that it's impossible to succeed. Even if we're lucky enough to kill all of them, what's the use? The Li clan still can't go against the entire upper three heavens. Also, we really can't wait any longer." Li Chuanbo smiled miserably. "We can't wait to die. Below the spring, the many young men who died first must be facing many old grudges right now. Without us old fogies holding the fort, what do they have to rely on? Won't they be bullied and humiliated by others?" Mo Tianji heaved a long sigh and didn't say anything else to console him. How could someone as wise as him understand the torment of these people's hearts? Watching their clansmen, juniors, and grandchildren die one by one in front of them, facing death with equanimity and heroism. Naturally, they were already mentally prepared to go on their way. Or rather, it should be said that the blood in their hearts was already burning to the extreme. If they still couldn't vent it out, they would probably burn themselves to ashes. Since that's the case, I won't try to persuade you anymore. Saying take care may be a little redundant, but I'll still say one last thing. Take care." Mo Tianji could only sigh. Li Chuanbo chuckled. "Take care? I'll make one last request. If it's possible to avoid it, I hope that Lord Sword Master and the robber will not participate in this final battle." Mo Tianji said, "This? I'm afraid it'll be very difficult. I believe that even if we don't participate, the other party will definitely not let us off." Li Chuanbo nodded in understanding. That's indeed the case. He turned around and didn't say anything else. This night, there was no sleep. Everyone couldn't sleep. In the faraway base of the Li clan in the northwest, the hundreds of thousands of women and children of the Li clan also couldn't sleep. All of them, either with black hair or white hair, stood quietly on the snowy ground, quietly looking into the distance at the place where the final battle was destined to take place. They were waiting. They were praying. They were praying for the safety of their loved ones, and waiting for the return of their loved ones. Some people couldn't help but cry out loud. However, someone immediately berated them. The crying stopped instantly. The crying was an ominous sign. At this moment, no ominous sign was allowed to appear. There was only a deathly silence. Everyone was waiting in this silence, hoping for a miracle. The boundless twilight once again descended upon the earth. The previously clear sky did not last for more than a few days. The sky was once again shrouded by dark clouds. The hailstones continued to fall until the second half of the night. Then, the hailstones melted into water on the hot ground, rose into the air, and returned to the sky. Once again, they condensed into frost and hailstones. In the latter half of the night, although the hailstones that fell onto the ground were still melting, the mist that could rise again gradually decreased. When dawn was about to break, the hailstones had already stopped. The ground was no longer scorching hot. A thick layer of ice crystals had formed on the ground. The light was so bright that it could reflect one's reflection. Everything within a radius of thousands of miles was sealed in ice. It was as smooth as a mirror. Dawn. When a ray of sunlight appeared, the entire ice plains became infinitely beautiful due to the morning light. It was too beautiful to behold. Li Chuanbo looked up to the sky and let out a long howl. His voice reverberated for thousands of miles. He said loudly, "Second brother Shao. The road to hell is long. Can you come and send me off for the last time?" Opposite him, Shao Qinyu's voice came from afar. "I'm at the end of my road today. Second brother naturally has to send me off." Li Chuanbo laughed and said, "With second brother accompanying me, I can die without regrets." His white robe fluttered, and he suddenly floated down. Like a drifting snowflake, he rose and fell with the wind. Chapter 1540. The Life and Death Divine Saber. Chu Xiangge carried an ancient, black and colorless saber on his back as he walked down beside Li Chuanbo. The two high-ranking guards, Li Zua and Li Yu, followed closely behind. The four of them were indifferent and expressionless. Li Xiangxi and the rest came after them. All of them followed behind calmly and leisurely, floating down the mountain in a single file. Many of them even had a faint smile at the corners of their mouths. That was a smile without any regrets. This scene really didn't look like they were about to go to a life and death battle. Instead, it looked like they were going to a banquet or something joyous. Finally, it was the dozen or so Li clan members who were already seriously injured. All of them supported each other and slowly walked forward while talking and laughing. When they reached Mo Tianji, they even smiled and greeted him. "Military advisor Mo, we won't meet again in this life. I hope to see you again in the next." Mo Tianji took a deep breath and forced a smile. "Have a safe journey. See you again in the next." On the opposite side, under the leadership of Shao Qinyu, more than 1,000 people from the allied army formed teams and came forward in an orderly manner. In comparison, the Li clan only had 100 or so people. They were too disorganized and undisciplined. In twos and threes, they walked slowly with their arms around each other's shoulders. There were only 100 or so people in total, but the entire formation was very long. The two sides stopped at a distance of 1,000 feet on the ice surface that was as smooth as a mirror. They stood opposite each other and looked at each other from afar. When Diwu Qingru saw the enemy's formation, he let out a long sigh and floated out from the team. He stood alone at one side and didn't move at all. In this battle, there was no place for him to use his skills. Because the other party was obviously here to die. Their only purpose was to die in battle. Nothing was a big deal except death. If even death wasn't a big deal, then there really wasn't a big deal. This was the purest battle that lived up to its name. If he still had to participate in commanding the battle at this time, he would be too much of a bully and wouldn't be able to live with his conscience. On the battlefield, there was nothing that could be unscrupulous. However, one had to consider the occasion, place, and time. It was always necessary to leave the enemy with the last bit of dignity. Let them have a battle with dignity. Let them go on their way without regrets. In addition, Diwu Qingru also discovered that there was a white-clothed young man standing alone in a distant place of the opposite party's camp. His white robe was fluttering in the wind. He should have been an otherworldly person. However, he was shrouded in a strange atmosphere at this moment. It was a kind of indescribable desolation and bleakness. If either of them denied or acquiesced, they would be looked down upon by the other. At this moment, Diwu Qingru said, "You have the heart, I have no heart." This sentence was not only a conclusion, but also a reason. Mo Tianji pondered for a while and said, "Perhaps that is the case." The two of them laughed at the same time. The two of them were each other's greatest enemies. Their wisdom could be said to be brilliant. They should have been incompatible like fire and water, and could not live under the same sky. However, at this moment, when they met and talked, they were like old friends who were extremely familiar with each other. They talked tirelessly without any wariness. Both of them knew that the so-called wariness, vigilance, and scheming were completely useless in front of this person in front of them. The two commanders were people who had already reached the top. Their conversation at this moment was the most honest and simple. What they said was the truth from the bottom of their hearts. It was hard to find a confidant in life. Being able to meet each other was a great fate. How could they not take advantage of this opportunity to talk things out? You said that you lost because the number of allied forces that I destroyed exceeded your initial estimation. Therefore, you think that you have lost. Mo Tianji said. Also, the final battle is about to begin. An army that is completely unafraid of death is extremely terrifying. Therefore, they will definitely continue to be exhausted. In fact, they will be exhausted even more. Just from this point alone, you have indeed lost. Di Wuqingro nodded. Yes, regarding this, I have nothing to say. He smiled and said, You think that you have lost because your initial strategy and ultimate goal were not achieved. It was far from the expected result. However, my strategic goal has already been achieved. Therefore, what you are looking at is the final result. From this point of view, the one who has lost is you. Mo Tianji pondered for a while and smiled. Yes, regarding this point, the ending is already the best explanation. Speaking of their ultimate goal, it had nothing to do with whether the Li clan was destroyed or not. It was not wrong to say that it had nothing to do with it at all. Mo Tianji wanted to cause chaos. He wanted to exhaust the strength of the big clans as much as possible. At the same time, he wanted to actively suppress Di Wuqingro's forces, so that the Diwu clan would not have the chance to become the strongest clan. The first half could be considered a success. Although it was not a complete success, it was still a success. The second half, although there were some gains, it was not really a success. As for Di Wuqingro's goal, firstly, was to defeat Mo Tianji, the legendary think tank. Secondly, it was to establish the Diwu clan. Even if it could not be established, it should at least be in its embryonic form. However, based on the results so far, he had not defeated Mo Tianji in a real sense. However, after the war in the northwest, the rise of the Diwu clan was already unstoppable. Even if Mo Tianji and Chu Yang wanted to stop it, there was nothing they could do in the short term. The first half was a failure, and the second half was a success. As the two talked, they did not care about their image anymore. They simply sat side by side and began to comment on the gains and losses since the beginning of the war. This was simply a phenomenon that was so strange that it could make one's hair stand on end. Two enemies who were completely opposite of each other. Two people who shouldn't be living together peacefully, just sat side by side quietly. At this moment, there was no difference between them at all. No, it should be a discussion without any distance between them. They might even be arguing, talking, or crying. This scene that should not have existed at all appeared so strangely and harmoniously. Di Wuqingro's courage could be said to be quite amazing. His cultivation was not just a little bit weaker than Mo Tianji's. If Mo Tianji wanted to kill Di Wuqingro now, it would be as easy as flipping his hand, because he could do it with a flip of his hand. However, Mo Tianji did not make a move, although he could get rid of this lifelong enemy with a wave of his hand. In the end, the two actually began to discuss the gains and losses. Up until now, this battle had been very thrilling. Tens of thousands of top experts rushed to the northwest. This was the first large-scale joint operation of the great clans in the heavenly layer in 10,000 years. Di Wuqingro had given up countless times. He had given up more than tens of thousands of saint-level experts. This was definitely a huge investment. As for Mo Tianji, he had used billions of purple crystals to pave the way. Along the way, he had used all kinds of mysterious formations to destroy clans. He had used hundreds of thousands of lives to carry out this battle that was already destined to end. He had done it even though he knew that it was impossible. In the end, he had gained a lot. Although he had lost control of the battle due to human factors, it was not his own fault. The huge investment that the two of them had made was too much to mention. However, the two of them did not talk about these at all. The main purpose of their discussion was to talk about each other's hearts and minds. From every battle and the situation of every battle, they could speculate about each other's state of mind, and mood at that time. The two of them argued for a long time, and finally came to a conclusion. This conclusion made the two of them sigh. They were really powerless to change it. Even if we were to do it again, I'm afraid the result would be the same if we disregarded human factors. This was the conclusion that Diwu Qingro gave. Mo Tianji expressed his agreement. If we really want to determine the victor between us, it will take a long time. Perhaps we will have to wait for decades or even centuries. Wait until you have accumulated some experience in war and the wisdom of the world. Then, your temperament will settle down as you grow older. Diwu Qingro said. If you can win at that time, I will lose without a doubt. Mo Tianji nodded. Chapter 1541. In the end, you and I are both people who can achieve our goals by fair means or foul. Persevering and decisive, we are the same. But there is still a significant difference. So, I have already gone to the extreme, but you still have room for improvement. Diwu Qingru sighed. Mo Tianji said. Indeed, your path may not be as you say, that you have already reached the extreme, but there is not much room for improvement. And I still have unlimited possibilities. In the future, I will definitely surpass you. Because I have no bottom line but you do. Diwu Qingru looked up at the sky and sighed. He was both unwilling and convinced. Mo Tianji also took a deep breath, and then sighed deeply. In the past, the situation had changed a few times, and there were new talents in every generation. Your victory is in the future. I can sacrifice anyone in the world, including myself, including everyone in the Diwu clan, in exchange for the result I want. Diwu Qingru said. But you can't do it. This is where you are lacking in my eyes. Mo Tianji, the current you is not even as good as Diwu Qingru. But because you can't do it, you still have feelings in your heart, and there are too many things you can't give up. So you still have unlimited space. The future Diwu Qingru will never be able to keep up with Mo Tianji. Because I can give up anything. I have already reached the extreme. So if you still want to move forward, it will be difficult for me to keep up with you. Mo Tianji said. Yes. So in the long run, you are not as good as me. Diwu Qingru smiled lightly. Unfortunately, your future is not here. And I don't want to leave anymore. I can't leave, and I have no reason to leave. So you are still unique and unmatched, right? Mo Tianji laughed. Just at this moment, there was suddenly a violent explosion. The two of them looked up at the same time. The first meeting, the first exchange, the first heart-to-heart talk between the two great wise men was broken for the first time. The fierce battle had officially begun. The 100 or so people on the Li clan side were really insignificant in front of the 1,000 or so people on the other side. The allied forces were also full of resentment. Of those who died here, which one of them wasn't a fellow cultivator? Which one of them wasn't a soulmate who had accompanied them for hundreds or thousands of years? Now all of a sudden, he had died an unnatural death. Heaven and man were separated forever, and he was a stranger in the netherworld. Which one of them wasn't filled with grief and indignation? His eyes were already bloodshot, and he was secretly accumulating his power, ready to kill at any moment. At this moment, when they saw that the Li clan had actually come over without any organization or formation, all of them were filled with even more hatred. The brutality in their hearts also rose abruptly. You're courting death. Almost from the very beginning of the battle, they were already risking their lives to kill. Fight to the end, fight to the death. Nothing would happen except death. The real decisive battle began when a supreme martial artist of the Li clan sacrificed himself and self-destructed. This supreme martial artist of the Li clan could be said to have had a rather unlucky year. His entire family might have suffered some kind of vicious curse. The women all died before they were even a few decades old. Only a large number of sons and grandsons were left. Now, at this moment, all the men in his family had already died in the previous battle. Most of them had chosen to perish together with the enemy. Completely disheartened, this old man no longer wanted to live anymore. Therefore, before Li Chuanbo and Li Xiangxi could even give the order, he had already charged out with a maniacal laugh, throwing himself into the enemy's allied forces like a cannonball. Then, there was a crazy and violent explosion, causing an empty space to appear in the allied forces' formation. There were also countless pieces of flesh and blood that shot out in all directions. Roar! Li Xiangxi's eyes turned red instantly. A low roar came from his throat, and he took the lead and charged out like a shooting star, charging straight into the enemy's formation. Behind him, all the Li clan members gritted their teeth and charged forward without a word. In the final decisive battle, the Li clan members who were completely at a disadvantage actually didn't make any sounds of killing. They just charged forward silently like a bunch of mutes and fought in silence. At this moment, the Li clan members only had killing in their minds. Even a cough would be a waste of energy, let alone a loud exhale. Did he ask you to be on guard? Saber light poured down like waterfalls, sword light like streaks of lightning across the sky. Blood-red light soared into the sky, and the smell of blood instantly spread for thousands of miles. Such a cruel and bloody battle was actually happening in such a silent manner. But with the fiercest momentum, it erupted with a loud bang. Xiao Qinyu rose into the air. His sword emitted sword aura that was hundreds of feet long, sweeping through the entire place. He shouted loudly, "Tribulation Sword Master, aren't you going to join the battle?" Li Chuanbo got up and said with a smile, "Second brother Xiao, you'd better send me off first. It won't be too late to find trouble with the sword master later." With a paw sound, cracks appeared in the air. A sword with a cold light suddenly appeared in his hand. It gave off a cold lightning-like glow. As his long beard fluttered in the wind, the sword was already in front of Xiao Qinyu. A round sword light suddenly poured down like the Milky Way from the heavens, shooting toward Xiao Qinyu. On the other side, Life and Death Divine Saber Chu Xiangge also rushed toward Xiao Qinyu with dazzling saber light around him. Since Li Chuanbo didn't want to live anymore, then he, as a brother of life and death, naturally had to accompany him in life and death. Speaking of brothers who were strangers in life and death, were they still brothers? Xiao Qinyu's sword flashed, and two Xiao Qinyus appeared in midair at the same time. One swung his sword and slashed at Li Chuanbo furiously, while the other slashed at Chu Xiangge. He shouted, "Since that's the case, I'll send you off first before I settle the score with the Tribulation Sword Master." In the blink of an eye, the three of them were already engaged in a chaotic battle. With a loud boom, saber light and sword aura shot out together, and a series of screams came from below. Li Chuanbo was completely indifferent to this. He raised his sword and attacked again. Diwu Qingru sighed and said, "Brother Mo, if fate allows, the Tianding Grand Meeting will be the time for us to fight again." Mo Tianji smiled. "Judging from the current situation, I'm afraid we are destined to be fated. This battle may really be unavoidable." "It's a foregone conclusion." Diwu Qingru smiled. "Heavenly layer versus extraterrestrial demon. This idea can't be realized. The selfishness of the big clans will cause you to choose to destroy them. Therefore, you and I will have to fight eventually. Who knows who will belong to that battle?" Waving his hand elegantly, Diwu Qingru turned and walked in the direction he came from. He left in a carefree manner, as if the 10,000-man battlefield in front of him was just a meaningless sacrifice. He didn't care at all. Mo Tianji stood with his hands behind his back, quietly watching Diwu Qingru leave. His right hand clenched into a fist behind his back, and his eyes flashed. He actually wanted to kill Diwu Qingru at this time. Once the opportunity to get rid of this threat was lost, it would be hard to find another. But in the end, he didn't attack. He didn't want to attack. With a flash, Chu Yang and the others appeared beside him. Chu Yang asked, "How was it?" Mo Tianji said, "A very scary person, a very respectable opponent. He is not as despicable and shameless as the rumors say. Instead, he has a kind of unscrupulous belief in the winner and the loser. It's very strange, very contradictory, He's different from a real villain. But he's definitely not a hypocrite." Unscrupulous belief in the winner and the loser. Chu Yang murmured and repeated. He said, "That's right. Di Wuqingru is such a person. This description is very vivid. Boss, are we really not participating in the battle?" Dong Wushang was eager to try. "We have to fulfill a few wishes of the Li clan. The first is Li Xiangxi, and the second is the women and children of the Li clan." Chu Yang sighed. "Tianji, have you ever thought that we'll end up in such a deep quagmire after using others?" Mo Tianji laughed bitterly. "Because we're still not Di Wuqingru after all." Chu Yang laughed and said, "Perhaps this is the true meaning of existence as a human. This is human nature." Mo Tianji nodded and said thoughtfully, "Everything can be sacrificed. After all, this is the means of an ambitious person. I, Mo Tianji, think of myself as an ambitious person, but when it comes to it, I can't be as cruel and carefree as him." Chu Yang nodded and said deeply, "This is where you beat him." The Allied forces were suddenly affected by the self-detonation and were slightly confused. However, they regained their footing in an extremely short period of time and immediately counterattacked. Like a tide, they drowned all the Li clan experts in the crowd. The two sides had only just clashed and dozens of people had already died. Saber light was like a forest and sword energy was like rain. Saber light was fatal, and sword energy was chasing after souls. Almost as soon as Li Xiangxi and the rest entered, they were immediately separated. However, no one was afraid at all. They fought with all their might. Everyone was here to die anyway. If they fought with their lives on the line, killing one was enough. If they killed a few more, they would be able to profit. One by one, the Li clan experts rushed into the enemy's dense battle circle and exploded. Strong and violent shock waves wreaked havoc everywhere. However, no one cared anymore. Everyone on both sides had already killed until their eyes were red. Although there were very few enemies, each and every one of them was a super desperado. Furthermore, those who could survive until now were all extremely powerful experts and sly old foxes. Whether it was in terms of eyesight or reaction, they were all above average. Naturally, they also had the capital to fight with their lives. Therefore, even when they chose to self-detonate, they were also above average. They could tell at a glance whether they could kill the enemies in front of them or not. If they could, of course, they would wait until they killed these few before self-detonating. If they couldn't and were only going to be killed, then they would naturally self-detonate without any hesitation. Of course, it would be best if they could make it to the area where the enemy was densely packed. For a moment, there was a series of loud booms. Dead bodies appeared one after another. The next moment, they were blasted away by another wave of explosions. The Li clan's 120 people were decreasing rapidly. In the blink of an eye, there were still 100 of them. But in the blink of an eye, there might already be less than 500 left. Every moment, countless people died. Chapter 1542. Li Xiangxi's side could be said to be the most stable, and also the safest link. However, this stability and safety were also relative. Li Zua and Li Yu, the two beginner-level experts, were by his side. These two were Li Chuanbuo's personal guards, assigned by Li Chuanbuo to his son during the final battle to ensure his safety. This was the last bit of effort that Li Chuanbuo could do for his son. The Li clan was already finished. He had once destroyed his son's lifelong happiness with his own hands. If in the end he couldn't even fulfill his son's longing, Li Chuanbuo would die with everlasting regret. Li Xiangxi and the other two were exceptionally strong, forming the most stable iron triangle. Charging back and forth in the enemy's formation, Li Zua and Li Yu's faces were as hard as stone. They didn't show the slightest bit of emotion, and just continued to kill. Before the trio's powerful strength, the number of experts of the Allied forces who had died in their hands had already exceeded 100. And this number was still rising continuously. The crowd surged, and a few unusually strong auras came head-on. At once, a cautious look appeared on the trio's faces. The beginner-level supreme martial artists hidden in the enemy's formation had finally started to target them. The crowd suddenly parted. Individuals appeared from 3 directions. Without a word, they flew up, their sabers and swords forming a fan shape, as if connecting heaven and earth into one. Pressing down madly. The 3 beginner-level supreme martial artists from the law enforcement officers, and the 3 beginner-level supreme martial artists from the various superclans had joined forces to attack. The eyes of Li Xiangxi and the other 2 were completely red. They didn't dodge or avoid, but went head-on. With a loud boom, blood oozed out of everyone's mouths and noses at the same time. Within a radius of 1,000 feet, everyone was knocked to the ground by the aftershock of the impact. Screams of agony rose and fell. Those were the subconscious screams of the combatants from both sides when they were being slaughtered. On this battlefield, such screams were the least valuable. There were also desperate and heroic laughs from time to time. That was the prelude to the Li clan expert's self-destruction. After every long laugh, there would be a loud boom. It was rare to see supreme martial artists self-destructing, but today it was as common as cabbages. It didn't cost a single cent, and one could enjoy watching. Under normal circumstances, the self-destruction of a supreme martial artist was enough to destroy the terrain here. However, with so many people and such a powerful explosion, not even a white spot appeared on the ground. As smooth as a mirror, the entire battlefield had turned into a boiling ocean, an ocean formed by the convergence of blood. More than 100 people against more than 1,000 people. With such a huge disparity between the 2 sides, there was no comparison between the 2 sides. However, the smoke of war was everywhere, and the flames of war were everywhere. It was so intense that it was hard to believe. One of the supreme martial artists of the Li clan shouted loudly. As he ruthlessly stabbed his sword into his enemy's heart, his left palm faced the other enemy, striking out separately. In the clash of palm forces, he was naturally at a disadvantage and suffered internal injuries instantly. A mouthful of blood had already surged to the side of his lips, but he forcefully swallowed it back. Instead of retreating to dissipate the force, he advanced instead, smashing his grizzled head into the enemy's head like a mad tiger. With a crack, both of their heads were bleeding at the same time, and they staggered back. This collision was really done with all their strength. Apart from the cracking of their heads, even their brains spilled out. As he retreated, 3 swords pierced deeply into his body from different directions. He laughed tragically and actually accelerated his retreat, crashing into the chest of one of the enemies. Crack, crack, the enemy's sword behind him was stuck in his abdomen, and a few of his ribs were actually broken by this collision. Despite his heavy internal and external injuries, he continued to fight. The sword in his hand flew out and actually pierced through the chest of an expert of the allied forces in front of him. When his hands were free, he forcefully flipped over and hugged the enemy's head with a ferocious smile. With a forceful twist, the sword stuck in his body was broken by this twist of his. Puff, puff, puff. Another 7 to 8 weapons slashed into his body like cutting vegetables. He was covered in wounds, and blood and flesh flew everywhere. However, as if he didn't feel any pain, he still forcefully twisted his body. The blood, flesh, and bones on his body were all leaving his body piece by piece, but he finally managed to twist the enemy's head off. That supreme martial artist of the Li clan held the enemy's head in his hand and roared into the sky. "You want to destroy the Li clan? I'll eat you. Who asked you to destroy the Li clan? I'll eat you. I'll eat you." He actually really brought the head to his mouth and chewed on it. His mouth was full of blood. It was the blood of the enemy, but also his own blood. He looked miserable, like a ferocious ghost. Judging from his injuries, both internal and external were already very heavy. His internal organs were all damaged. With such injuries, even if he died 3 to 5 times, he could still persevere and not die. The only thought in his mind was to kill the people who wanted to destroy the Li clan, to devour the enemy's flesh and blood, and to protect his home. Everyone watching from the side, regardless of their cultivation level, all felt a chill run down their spines and their hair stand on end. Another round of sword light flew past, and the entire body of this Li clan expert turned into minced meat all over the ground. Even his head was no exception. Only that mouthful of eerie white teeth were still glaring menacingly at the sky, biting onto that human head with a death grip, never letting go. Old Fifth. Ha ha ha. Good death. A 7th grade supreme martial artist of the Li clan laughed maniacally. He roared tragically, worthy of being the seat of the old. Good death. Good death. You didn't embarrass the old. Your spirit won't be far away. Remember forever. Your surname is fuckingly. Ha ha ha. The supreme martial artist who had just died in the battle was his fifth son. This old man laughed wildly as he walked over with his body riddled with scars. Wherever he passed, the crowd would scatter to the sides to avoid him. This kind of unstoppable momentum made people not dare to block his sharpness. Even the experts of the same level couldn't help but give way. Such power and influence shocked everyone present. The old man came over in a frenzy and stood upright on top of his son's flesh. He reached out his hand and grabbed the remaining half of his son's head. He laughed loudly and said, "How can this bastard be worthy of being with you?" With a smack, he dug out the broken head in his son's mouth and smashed it into fine powder. Then he spun around. Silver light flashed all over his body, but countless broken swords and blades shot out from all parts of his body. Screams sounded continuously all around. That elder's spinning body suddenly stopped, and he started to take a deep breath. His stomach suddenly bulged. That was the sign of self-destruction. He's going to self-destruct. Quick, kill him quickly. Everyone, let's join forces and stop him. A 7th-grade supreme martial artist of the Allied forces roared and took the lead to rush over. The elder laughed loudly. If he wants to self-destruct, then so be it. Can you stop him? Join forces and attack together? Why aren't you here yet? Come quickly, ha ha. Come and join me on the road. Facing the countless swords and sabers coming at him, he advanced instead of retreating. He jumped up, and the swords and sabers above his head were like a forest in rain. Just like that, he flew up against the countless swords and sabers without dodging. He looked up at the sky and roared, "Son, wait for me on the road to the netherworld. Wait for me to open the way for you. Our family will gather in the netherworld and follow the elder master to rebuild the Li clan. The grandson of the Li clan will walk the same path in life and death." Amidst the endless maniacal laughter, the elder hugged half of his son's head and fell into the dense crowd of the Allied forces like a meteorite, exploding with a loud bang. A large number of screams sounded immediately. After the elder self-destructed, he actually cleared out a large area with him as the core. That elder's maniacal laughter seemed to still reverberate in the air, lingering in the air. "Good. Third uncle, good job. Your nephew is here too." Another loud roar sounded, and another person soaked in blood leaped high into the air. "How many sins have I committed? If there is a next life, I will atone for them." Boom! A loud explosion sounded. At this moment, the Li clan seemed to have gone completely mad, slashing with sabers, slashing with swords, and when they had no more weapons, they used their hands, fists, and finally teeth to bite. They were like a group of beasts that were surrounded. At this moment, when the clan was about to be destroyed, everyone was fighting with their lives on the line, using as much as possible to exchange for as many casualties as possible for the enemy. The destruction of the Li clan was already a foregone conclusion. This was something that both the enemy and friend had long understood. But destruction was destruction. A foregone conclusion was a foregone conclusion. How to die and how to die was completely different. Dying heroically in battle, and dying together with the enemy, was the most glorious way to die. It was also the last glory that the Li clan could enjoy. This glory was firmly grasped by them. They would never abandon it. They would never give up. What was truly inconceivable was that in this battle, those who showed cowardice and cowardice were actually all the experts of the Allied forces, who had an overwhelming advantage in terms of both numbers and strength. Actually, to say that it was inconceivable wasn't necessarily so. Other than death, there was no big deal. The Li clan didn't fear death at all. In fact, they had even come here to seek death. To them, death was just an inevitable outcome today. However, those experts of the Allied forces were all afraid of death. In fact, the more powerful they were, the more afraid they were of death. Having lived for a long time, the longer they lived, the more afraid they were of death. How could those who were afraid of death compete with those who weren't afraid of death? Even if they were superior in terms of numbers and strength, their imposing manner, especially those who didn't hesitate to die for the sake of destroying the enemy, couldn't be compared at all. Looking at all the battles in the past 10,000 years, no matter if they were famous or not, they had never seen such a tragic battle. At the last moment of their lives, the Li clan members seemed to have been possessed by ferocious beasts and evil spirits. Facing death, which used to make one's face pale at the mention of it, today, it became so common that it even made one yearn for it. In the past, when one of them died, the entire clan would mourn and cry bitterly. But now, every time one of them died, the remaining Li clan members who were still alive actually seemed to have taken drugs and were once again moved, as if they had received supreme glory.